I won $55 million on a Tuesday morning. By Thursday evening, my own brother kicked me out of his mansion because my work boots were dirty. He had no idea I could buy his entire neighborhood with the ticket sitting in my chest pocket. My name is Marcus King, and this is the story of how I tested my family loyalty, only to watch them fail in the most brutal way imaginable. Before we dive into this nightmare Thanksgiving dinner, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever been the black sheep who finally bit back. The white columns of Darius's house in Buckhead looked like they belonged on a movie set. My brother loved playing the part of the successful Atlanta real estate mogul, even though I knew he was leveraged up to his eyeballs. I parked my rusted HVAC service van behind his leased Mercedes G-Wagon. The contrast was deliberate. The oil stain on my shirt was fresh, and I smelled like burnt wiring and attic dust. It was perfect for what I needed to do. I took a deep breath and patted the inside pocket of my grease-stained coveralls, where the winning lottery ticket was wrapped in a plastic bag. I rang the doorbell and waited. I could hear laughter and the clinking of expensive glassware inside. It took 2 minutes for someone to answer. When the door finally opened, it was Tiffany. My sister-in-law looked like she had just stepped out of a magazine wearing a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my van. Her smile vanished the second she saw me. She didn't say Happy Thanksgiving. She didn't move to hug me. She blocked the doorway with her body like a bouncer at a club. "Marcus," she said, her voice tight and hushed. "We stopped waiting for you an hour ago." I tried to step inside, but she held up a manicured hand, stopping me in my tracks. "Stop right there. You are not walking on my new Persian rug in those boots. Darius paid $10,000 for that silk blend, and I will not have you tracking blue-collar filth all over it." I looked down at my work boots. They were heavy and scuffed, but they were honest work. I came straight from a job, Tiff. It was an emergency call. She wrinkled her nose and actually waved her hand in front of her face as if I were a bag of trash. "You smell like a crawl space. Take them off. And that jacket too. Leave them on the porch. We have guests inside who actually dressed for the occasion." I stripped down to my socks on the cold stone porch while she watched to make sure I complied. I left my jacket there, making sure the lottery ticket was deep in the pocket of my undershirt. When I finally walked into the dining room, the conversation died instantly. It was like someone had pulled the plug on a stereo. My mother, Viola, was at the head of the table holding a crystal wine glass filled with red wine. My wife, Nia, was sitting next to her, looking at her phone, not even bothering to glance up. Darius was carving the turkey with a gold-plated electric knife. "Look what the cat dragged in," Darius sneered, not looking up from the bird. "Did you fix the toilet or whatever you were doing, or are you just here to eat my food?" Nia didn't even look at me. She just sighed loud enough for everyone to hear and took a long sip of her wine. "I hope you brought a change of clothes, Marcus. You look like you have been rolling in a dumpster. I am sitting next to Dr. Johnson tonight, and I do not want you embarrassing me." I clenched my jaw. They saw a failure, a laborer who couldn't make ends meet. They didn't see the man who was currently the wealthiest person in the room. I sat down in the only empty chair, the folding one at the corner of the table that they always saved for me. "I need to talk to you all," I said, keeping my voice low and trembling just enough to sell it. "I am in trouble, big trouble, big." Tiffany set a plate down in front of me with a thud. It had significantly less turkey than everyone else. "Can it wait until after we eat?" she asked. "We are trying to have a civilized evening." "No," I said, staring at my mother. "It cannot wait. I made a mistake on the job today, a massive mistake. I fried a client's server room cooling system. They are suing me for $50,000. If I do not pay by Monday, I am going to jail." The silence that followed my announcement was heavy enough to crush bones. I looked around the table, waiting for someone, anyone, to show a flicker of concern. My mother froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. Nia stopped scrolling on her phone, her eyes widening, not with fear for me, but with something that looked suspiciously like disgust. But it was Darius who reacted first. And his reaction was worse than anger. It was amusement. He slowly set down the carving knife and reached for the bottle of Caymus Cabernet sitting in the center of the table. The dark red liquid glugged into his glass, swirling rich and expensive against the crystal. He took a sip, savoring it, closing his eyes for a moment, as if he were in a commercial. Then he looked at me with a smirk that made my blood boil. $50,000, Darius repeated, tasting the words like the wine. You managed to do $50,000 worth of damage installing an air conditioner. That takes a special kind of talent, Marcus. It was a server room cooling system for a crypto mining firm, I explained, keeping my head down, playing the part of the beaten dog. High-end equipment. The client is livid. They are threatening criminal negligence charges because they lost data due to the heat spike. I need a lawyer, Darius. I need to settle this before they go to the police on Monday morning. I do not have that kind of cash. Darius laughed, a short barking sound that echoed off the high ceilings. Of course you do not. You never do. I told you 10 years ago to go to college, Marcus. I told you that manual labor was a dead end for people who lack vision. But no, you wanted to work with your hands. You wanted to be your own man. He gestured around the dining room with his wine glass, the red liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. Well, look around, little brother. This is what being educated gets you. A house in Buckhead. A seat at the table. And you are sitting there in dirty socks begging for a bailout because you are not smart enough to do a job without breaking things. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles turning white. I am not asking for a bailout. I lied, my voice trembling. I am asking for a loan. I will pay you back with interest. Every cent. I just need to stay out of jail. Darius shook his head, his expression hardening into cold indifference. I am not a bank, Marcus, and even if I were, I do not lend to high-risk investments. You are a walking liability. Always have been. He took another long sip of wine, his eyes locking onto mine with zero empathy. Consider this a life lesson. Maybe in prison you will finally have time to read a book and learn something. That is the price of stupidity, Marcus. You broke it, you bought it. Do not look at me to clean up your mess. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. He meant it. My own flesh and blood would watch me go to prison rather than part with a fraction of his wealth. I looked at my mother, expecting her to intervene to scold him for being so cruel, but she just stared at her plate, pushing a cranberry around with her knife, refusing to meet my eyes. That silence hurt more than Darius's words. It was a confirmation. I was on my own. And the ticket in my pocket suddenly felt heavier, a secret weapon I was itching to use, but knew I had to save for the perfect moment. I turned to Nia, expecting at least a shred of sympathy. We had been married for 5 years. We had vowed to support each other for better or worse. But as I looked into her eyes, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. It was not concern. It was pure, unadulterated hatred. She did not ask if I was okay. She did not ask if I was going to lose my license. She stood up so abruptly that her chair tipped over backward, crashing onto the hardwood floor with a deafening bang. Then she grabbed her dinner plate. It was heavy fine china piled high with turkey and cranberry sauce. With a scream of frustration, she hurled it across the room. It shattered against the cream-colored wallpaper, leaving a greasy streak of gravy sliding down the expensive finish. Tiffany gasped, and Darius swore, but Nia did not even blink. She kept her eyes locked on me, trembling with rage. "Are you actually serious right now, Marcus?" she screamed, her voice cracking. "You are telling me you are $50,000 in the hole. Do you have any idea what you have just done to me? Not to us. To me. I put a non-refundable deposit down on a G-Wagon this morning, Marcus. A matte black G63. I have been on the waiting list for 8 months. The dealer finally called me today. I told all the girls at the salon I was picking it up next week. And now you come in here smelling like a sewer and tell me you are broke." I sat there stunned. My freedom was on the line. My career was in ashes. And she was worried about a luxury SUV she could not afford in the first place. "Nia," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I am talking about jail time. I am talking about losing everything. You have already lost everything, she spat back. You are a loser, Marcus. I have tried to build us up. I have tried to create an image that we are successful, that we belong in this circle. I work my fingers to the bone at the spa networking with real men, men who make 6 figures before lunch. And I come home to you, a man who plays in the dirt for a living, and cannot even do that right. She walked around this table, her heels clicking aggressively on the floor until she was standing right over me. I could smell her perfume, expensive and overpowering, mixed with the scent of the wine she had been drinking. Do not think for 1 second that I am dipping into my savings to fix this. That money is for my future, my brand. I am not throwing it away on a man who drags me down. Darius is right. You are a liability. She looked at Tiffany, who was still staring in horror at the stain on her wall. Look at Tiffany, she said, gesturing wildly. Look at her life, Marcus. She vacations in St. Bart's. She drives a Rover. She does not have to worry about her husband getting sued because he fried a circuit board like an amateur. I should have married a doctor. I should have listened to my mother when she said you would never amount to anything more than a blue-collar disappointment. She reached down and grabbed her purse, clutching it like a weapon. You are on your own, Marcus. Do not ask me for a dime. In fact, do not even ask me for a ride home. I am not having that dirty van parked in my driveway tonight. Fix this yourself or rot in a cell. I do not care which one you choose as long as it does not affect my credit score. You have ruined my night. You have ruined my car purchase. You have ruined my life. Get out of my face before I throw something else. I drove my service van through the rain back to the small bungalow Nia and I had bought 3 years ago. The downpour was torrential, the kind of Atlanta storm that turns streets into rivers in minutes. I just wanted a hot shower and a bed. I wanted to wake up from this nightmare and realize my family still loved me. But when I punched my code into the keypad of the front door, the light did not turn green. It flashed a harsh, angry red. Access denied. I tried again, thinking my shaking fingers had slipped. 4028. Red light. Access denied. I pulled out my phone to check the smart home app, but I was already logged out. Password invalid. She had locked me out. She had actually digitally evicted me from my own house in the time it took me to drive home. I pounded on the door, the rain plastering my hair to my forehead. Nia opened the door. I live here too. You cannot just lock me out. The second-story window slid open with a screech. Nia leaned out, holding a large black garbage bag. She did not look sad. She looked efficient, like she was taking out the trash. And in a way, she was. You do not live here anymore, Marcus, she shouted over the sound of the rain. I am not letting the marshals seize my furniture because you are a criminal. I am protecting my assets. She heaved the bag out the window. It hit the wet grass with a wet, heavy thud that sounded sickeningly like a body hitting the ground. Then came another, and another. My clothes, my shoes, my few personal possessions, all treated like literal garbage. Get this crap off my lawn, she screamed, her voice shrill and echoing down the quiet suburban street. If you are not gone in 5 minutes, I am calling the police and telling them you are trespassing. I scrambled to pick up the bags, the thin plastic tearing in my grip, spilling my socks into the mud. I looked up, desperate to reason with her, but she was already closing the window. That is when I saw the flash. Across the street, Mrs. Higgins was standing on her porch, holding her phone up, recording everything. The red light of her video camera blinked in the darkness, a digital eye witnessing my humiliation. I knew that video would be on the neighborhood Facebook group within 10 minutes. Look at the poor King girl kicking out her deadbeat husband. I stood there in the pouring rain, clutching a muddy bag of underwear with $55 million burning a hole in my pocket. I could buy this whole block right now. I could buy Mrs. Higgins' house and turn it into a parking lot. But I did not say a word. I just threw the bags into the back of my van and climbed into the driver's seat, shivering uncontrollably. This was it. The bottom, the absolute 0 point of my life. And as I turned the key and the engine sputtered to life, I made a silent vow. When I come back up, I am coming up alone. I drove my van to the one place I thought I would always be welcome. My mother's house. The rain was still coming down in sheets, washing the mud from my front lawn off my boots, but doing nothing to clean the stain of failure Nia had branded me with. Mom lived in a pristine townhouse on the edge of Cascade, an area she loved to remind people was up and coming. The windows were glowing with warm yellow light, and I could see silhouettes moving inside. It looked like safety. It looked like home. I ran up the walkway shivering. My clothes were soaked through, and I knew I looked like a wreck. I rang the bell praying she was alone. When the door opened, it was only a crack. My mother Viola peered out, her face perfectly, made up her hair stiff with hairspray. She was wearing her Sunday best on a Thursday night, complete with the pearls Dad had bought her 20 years ago. "Marcus," she hissed, her eyes scanning my wet clothes and the dirty van in the driveway. "What on earth are you doing here? You look like a vagrant." "Mom, I need help," I said, my teeth chattering. Nia kicked me out. She threw my clothes in the yard. "I have nowhere to go. Can I just sleep on the couch tonight? Just for one night until I figure this out." She did not open the door wider. In fact, she pressed her body into the gap, blocking my view of the interior. But I could hear them. The high-pitched laughter of the ladies from the Missionary Society, the clinking of teacups, the hum of gossip disguised as prayer. "You absolutely cannot come in here," she whispered furiously. "The committee is here, Marcus. We are planning the Christmas gala. Mrs. Patterson is sitting right there on the sofa. If she sees you looking like this, smelling like wet dog and gasoline, she will talk about it for months." "Do you want to ruin my reputation?" "Your reputation?" I asked, incredulous. "Mom, I am your son. I am in trouble. I might go to jail. I am sleeping in my truck. Does that not matter more than what Mrs. Patterson thinks?" She sighed, the sound of a woman inconvenienced by a stain on her blouse, not a mother worried about her child. "Lower your voice. You are embarrassing me. I told you years ago that you needed to elevate yourself, Marcus. Darius and Tiffany understand the importance of presentation. You never did. And now look at you, begging at my door like a homeless person while I am trying to host a respectable event." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a $20 bill wadded up like a tissue. "Here, go find a motel on the highway, or sleep in your van. Just get away from my house before someone looks out the window. I cannot have you dragging my name through the mud because you refuse to make something of yourself." She threw the money at my chest. It fluttered down into a puddle on the porch. Then she looked me dead in the eye. "Fix your life, Marcus. And do not come back until you look like someone I can introduce to my friends." The door clicked shut. I heard the deadbolt slide home. Inside, the laughter resumed. I looked down at the $20 bill soaking in the rainwater. I did not pick it up. I turned around and walked back to my van, leaving the money and my mother behind. I pulled the service van into the back corner of a 24-hour Walmart parking lot. It was the only place I knew I would not get towed or arrested for loitering. The back of the van smelled like old copper piping and Freon, a metallic tang that usually meant work, but tonight meant survival. I cleared a space between the heavy tool racks and curled up on a pile of canvas drop cloths, trying to find a position that did not dig into my ribs. The metal floor sucked the heat right out of my bones within minutes. My stomach growled a low, angry rumble that echoed in the small steel box. I had not eaten since lunch, and the hunger was starting to turn into a dull headache. I reached into my chest pocket and carefully pulled out the sandwich bag. Inside was a flimsy slip of paper worth $55 million. I turned on the dim dome light and pulled out my phone. My battery was sitting at 12%. Just enough. I opened the lottery app for the 100th time that day. My hands were shaking, partly from the cold and partly from the sheer insanity of my situation. I scanned the barcode. The little wheel on the screen spun for an agonizing second before the digital green confetti exploded across my cracked screen. "Congratulations. Winner, $55 million. I stared at the numbers, 55 followed by 6 zeros. It looked fake. It looked like a phone number from a movie or a glitch in the Matrix. I looked at the half-eaten granola bar I had found in the glove box. It was stale wrapper torn rock hard. This was my reality. I was a multimillionaire eating garbage in a parking lot while my breath fogged up the windows. The irony was so thick, I could taste it like copper. I thought about Nia sleeping in our warm, king-sized bed, probably dreaming about her matte black G-Wagon. I thought about Darius drinking wine that cost more than my weekly paycheck, swirling it in a crystal glass. I thought about my mother worrying about what Mrs. Patterson thought of my shoes while she slammed the door in my face. They all saw a loser. They saw a man who had hit rock bottom. They had no idea I was sitting on a rocket ship ready to blast off. I took a bite of the stale granola bar. It tasted like cardboard, but I forced it down. I wrapped the ticket back up in the plastic bag and shoved it deep into my work boot under the insole. It was safer there than in a bank vault. Let them think I am broken. Let them think I am desperate. The colder I got tonight, the colder my heart would be when I finally revealed the truth. I closed my eyes, shivering in the darkness, listening to the shopping carts rattle outside. I was not just surviving tonight, I was plotting. And tomorrow, the game would really begin. I woke up to a sharp rapping on the driver's side window. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I thought it was the police telling me to move along, or maybe a security guard ready to write me a ticket for loitering. I scrambled to sit up, wiping the fog from the glass with my sleeve. It wasn't a cop. It was a dented gray Honda Civic parked right next to me with the engine idling. The driver's window rolled down and a familiar face peered out. It was Dante. My cousin looked rough. His dreads were pulled back in a messy tie, and he was wearing a faded hoodie that had seen better days. He looked exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed from staring at the road for too long. "Marcus," he called out, his breath puffing in the cold air. "Open up, man. It is freezing out here." I unlocked the door and pushed it open. The cold air rushed in, biting through my thin coveralls. Dante climbed out of his car and hopped into the passenger seat of my van, slamming the door shut against the wind. He rubbed his hands together and looked around at the cramped, tool-filled space. "Damn, cousin," he said, shaking his head. "You really are living the van life, huh? I saw your mom's Facebook post. She said you were taking some time away to reflect on your choices. I knew that was code for she kicked you to the curb." I let out a dry laugh. Reflected on my choices. That was a nice way of saying I was homeless and unwanted. "Yeah, Dante." Nia locked me out. Mom wouldn't let me pass the foyer. Everyone else treated me like I had the plague. Dante sighed, leaning back against the seat. "I feel you, man. They act like if they touch us, the broke might rub off on them. Darius called me last week to ask if I could drive his clients to the airport for free. Said it would be good exposure for my business. I drive an Uber Marcus. What exposure am I getting?" He reached into the pocket of his hoodie and pulled out a wad of crumpled bills. He counted them out on the dashboard. It was mostly tens and twenties, a few fives. It looked like about $200. "Here," he said, pushing the pile toward me. "It is not much. It was a slow night. But it will get you a motel room and some hot food. Do not look at me like that, Marcus. Take it." I stared at the money. $200. It was nothing compared to the ticket hidden in my boot. It was pocket change. But coming from Dante, it was everything. I knew he was saving for tuition, trying to get back into community college after dropping out to help his mom with rent. This money was his lifeline, and he was handing it to me without hesitation. "Dante, I cannot take this," I said, my voice thick. "You need this for school." "School can wait," he said firmly. "Family cannot. You are the only one who checked on me when my transmission blew last year. You are the only one who did not look down on me for driving folks around instead of sitting in a corner office. We are the black sheep, Marcus. We have to look out for each other, because nobody else is going to do it." He reached into a plastic bag at his feet and pulled out a foil-wrapped sandwich. It smelled like spicy chicken and old grease. "I got you a spicy chicken sandwich too." I took a bite out of it, but I cut that part off. It is still good. I took the cold sandwich and the crumpled bills. The weight of them in my hands felt heavier than the millions resting under my heel. My brother had wine that cost more than this cash. My wife had shoes worth 10 times this amount, but none of them had offered me a single thing. Dante, who had nothing, gave me everything he had. I bit into the cold sandwich and it tasted like the best meal I had ever eaten. I looked at my cousin shivering in his thin hoodie, and I made a silent promise right there in the Walmart parking lot. "Thanks, Dante," I said, swallowing hard. "I am going to pay you back. I swear." "Do not worry about it, cousin," he said, giving me a fist bump. "Just get back on your feet. When you make it big, you can buy me a new car." I forced a smile, holding back the tears that wanted to spill over. "You have no idea," I thought. "You have no idea what kind of car you are going to be driving." "Get some sleep," Marcus Dante said, opening the door. "I have to get back on the app. The morning rush is starting soon." Dante paused with his hand on the door handle of his beat-up Civic. He looked back at me through the open window of my van, his expression a mix of exhaustion and fierce loyalty. "You know what Mom said about me last Christmas, Marcus? She told the whole family I was destined to be nothing but a driver. She laughed about it while drinking eggnog I paid for." He shook his head, staring at the cracked pavement. "Now they are saying the same stuff about you, calling you a criminal, a failure." He looked me dead in the eye. "They think we are trash, Marcus, just two piles of garbage cluttering up their perfect lives. But you know what? Trash has to stick together. If we do not hold each other up, nobody else is going to do it. We are all we have got, man. Two piles of trash leaning on each other to survive. That is our reality." He gave me a final nod, a silent pact sealed in the freezing air of a Walmart parking lot. Then he slid into his car, the engine sputtering before finally catching. I watched his taillights disappear into the morning mist, the red glow fading until I was alone again. I sat there in the silence, the crumpled bills still warm from his hand. The spicy chicken sandwich sat on the dashboard wrapped in foil like a treasure. I felt a stinging sensation in my eyes. I tried to blink it away, but it was useless. A single hot tear rolled down my cheek. Then another. I did not make a sound. I just sat there gripping the steering wheel while silent tears tracked through the grime on my face. I had $55 million in my boot. I could buy Dante a fleet of cars. I could buy his mother's house. I could change his life with a signature. But that was not why I was crying. I was crying because for the first time in my life, I realized I was not poor. I had been poor when I thought Darius's approval mattered. I had been poor when I thought Nia's love was real. But here, with $200 and a half-eaten sandwich, I felt rich. Dante had given me something money could not buy. He gave me loyalty. He gave me dignity when everyone else tried to strip it away. And I swore on my life right then and there that he would never drive that Civic again. I walked into the office of Julian Thorne with dirt still lodged under my fingernails and a net worth potentially higher than his entire firm. Thorne was the kind of financial attorney who usually handled mergers for tech startups or protected assets for rappers going through messy divorces. He looked at my grease-stained coveralls with a mixture of confusion and professional disdain. I did not blame him. I looked like I was there to fix his air conditioning, not to retain his services. I sat down in the leather chair across from his mahogany desk and placed the plastic sandwich bag in the center of the blotter. I did not say a word. I just slid it toward him. Thorne put on his reading glasses and picked up the bag gingerly, as if it contained evidence from a crime scene. He pulled out the ticket, smoothed it flat, and scanned the numbers. Then he checked his computer screen. When he looked back up at me, the disdain was gone, completely replaced by a laser-focused intensity. "I want to remain anonymous," I said, my voice flat and hard. "I do not want my face on the news. I do not want my name in the papers. And most importantly, I do not want my family to know a single thing until I am ready to burn their world down." Thorne nodded slowly, tapping a gold pen against the desk. Georgia law allows lottery winners to remain anonymous if they claim the prize through a limited liability company. We can set up a blind trust or an LLC. It effectively shields your identity from the public record. You will just be a signature on a document, Marcus. To the world, you do not exist. Do it, I said. Set up the LLC. We need a name for the entity. Thorne said, his fingers hovering over his keyboard. Something generic is usually best. Something that does not draw attention. No, I said, staring at the diploma on his wall. I do not want generic. I want something that reminds me of what I am doing. Call it Phoenix Rising. Phoenix Rising. Thorne typed it in. Dramatic, but effective. Now regarding my fee. I require a retainer to begin the filing process and handle the lottery commission. It is $5,000 up front. I felt a cold sweat break out on my back. $5,000 was literally every cent I had left in my secret emergency savings account. It was the money I had been hoarding for a down payment on a new van. If I paid him, I would have zero cushion. I would be living on Dante's handout and whatever scrap metal I could sell. I pulled out my phone and transferred the money. My bank balance dropped to double digits. It felt like jumping off a cliff without checking if the parachute was packed. It is done, I said, showing him the confirmation screen. You work for me now. Thorne smiled a shark-like grin that told me he smelled blood in the water. Indeed I do, Mr. King. Or should I say Mr. Phoenix? We will file the paperwork tomorrow. Until then, you are broke, you are desperate, and you are the most dangerous man in Atlanta. I walked out of his office feeling lighter than air. I had just spent my last dime to buy a new identity. Marcus, the HVAC tech, was dead. Phoenix Rising was born, and he was hungry. Nia picked the Waffle House off the interstate not because she liked the hash browns, but because she knew none of her high society friends would ever be caught dead there. It was the perfect place to dispose of a husband she was ashamed of. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow on the sticky laminated table. I walked in wearing the same clothes I had been sleeping in for 3 days. The waitress gave me a look that said buy something or get out, but I ignored her. My eyes were fixed on the booth in the back corner. Nia was sitting there looking like she was dressed for a red carpet event in a sequined top that probably cost more than the fry cook made in a month. But she was not alone. Sitting next to her, sliding his arm possessively along the back of the vinyl booth, was a man I recognized from billboards around the city. Dr. Sterling. The plastic surgeon who put up ads promising to fix your flaws for $5,000 down. He was wearing a suit that looked like it was made of silk, and his teeth were so white they looked fake. I slid into the booth opposite them. Nia did not say hello. She did not ask how I was surviving on the streets. She just wrinkled her nose and pushed a thick envelope across the table. It slid through a puddle of syrup left by the previous customer. Sign it, Marcus, she said, her voice cold and flat. Right now, I am not dragging this out. I have a life to live, and you are currently the biggest obstacle in my way. I looked at the envelope, then at Dr. Sterling. He looked at me with a smirk that made me want to rearrange his perfect nose. He checked his gold Rolex and sighed loudly. Make it quick, buddy, he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. We have a reservation at Le Bilboquet in an hour. We are just here to take out the trash first. I felt the anger flare up hot and sharp, but I pushed it down. This was part of the plan. I needed to be free. I opened the envelope. It was a divorce settlement. I scanned the terms. They were brutal. Nia wanted the house. She wanted the car. She wanted the furniture. In exchange, I would take on all the marital debt, including the $50,000 I supposedly owed for the server room accident. I would walk away with absolutely nothing but the clothes on my back and my debt. You want everything, I said, looking up at her. You are kicking me while I am down, Nia. I am homeless. And whose fault is that, she snapped. You chose to be a failure, Marcus. I chose to upgrade. Dr. Sterling here knows how to treat a woman. He just bought me a tennis bracelet just because it was Tuesday. What have you ever bought me besides stress and embarrassment? Sterling laughed, a dry, cruel sound. Look at him, Nia, he is pathetic. Just sign the papers, pal. Do yourself a favor, she is way out of your league. You are doing her a service by letting her go. I looked at the pen Nia had placed on the table. It was a cheap promotional pen from her spa. I picked it up. My hand hovered over the signature line. If I signed this, I was legally severing myself from her. Any assets I acquired after this date would be mine alone. The lottery money would be safe. If I fought her, it could take months, and she might get wind of the win. I looked at Nia one last time. I remembered the day we got married, how she promised to stand by me. Now she was sitting in a Waffle House with a man who looked like a plastic mannequin stealing the house I had renovated with my own hands. You can have it, I said quietly. You can have the house. You can have the car. You can have the debt. I do not want any of it. I signed my name with a flourish. The ink was black and permanent. I pushed the papers back across the sticky table. Nia grabbed them, checking the signature like she was inspecting a counterfeit bill. Once she was satisfied, she let out a breath she had been holding. Her entire demeanor changed. She looked triumphant. Finally, she said, tucking the papers into her designer bag. You finally did something right, Marcus. Good luck with the debt. I hope you enjoy prison or wherever you end up. Dr. Sterling stood up, buttoning his jacket. He threw a $5 bill on the table. Get yourself a coffee, buddy. You look like you need it. They walked out of the diner arm in arm, laughing about something he whispered in her ear. I watched them go. They thought they had just stripped me of everything. They thought they had won. They had no idea I had just signed the most profitable deal of my life. I picked up the $5 bill Sterling had thrown at me. I ordered a coffee and a waffle. It was the best meal I had eaten in days because it tasted like freedom. Darius King sat in his corner office overlooking Peachtree Street, adjusting the cuffs of a shirt he had put on a credit card that was 2 days away from being maxed out. On his mahogany desk lay a stack of past due notices, hidden under a glossy brochure for a property he hadn't sold in 6 months. The market was cooling, and his lifestyle was burning cash faster than he could print it. He needed a miracle. He needed a whale. When his iPhone buzzed displaying a blocked caller ID, he almost sent it to voicemail thinking it was another creditor. But something told him to answer. He put on his best voice, the one that sounded like old money and success. Darius King speaking. Mr. King. The voice on the other end was smooth, precise, and sounded like it cost $1,000 an hour. This is Julian Thorne. I am the lead counsel for the Phoenix Rising Investment Group. Darius sat up straighter. He had heard the rumors swirling around Atlanta real estate circles. Phoenix Rising was a ghost entity. New money, massive capital, aggressive acquisitions. They were buying up commercial zones and luxury condos with cash. Mr. Thorne, Darius said, trying to keep the desperation out of his voice. I have heard of your firm. How can King Realty assist you today? We are looking at the Meridian Heights complex, Thorne said. We understand you hold the exclusive listing. We are prepared to make an all-cash offer, 20% above asking price. We want to close in 14 days. Darius felt the blood rush to his head. He did the math instantly. The commission on that deal would be 6 figures. It would wipe out his credit card debt. It would pay the lease on the G-Wagon. It would save him. He gripped the phone tighter, his knuckles turning white. Meridian Heights is a crown jewel. Darius lied smoothly, knowing the building had mold issues and pending lawsuits. I have several interested parties, but for a cash offer of that magnitude, I can certainly prioritize your client. Excellent, Thorne replied. My client values 2 things, Mr. King: speed and discretion. We are looking for a local partner who understands how the real world works. Someone who is not burdened by sentimental attachments. We need the current tenants vacated immediately post-closing. It might get ugly. Do you have the stomach for that? Darius laughed, a cold sound that bounced off the glass walls of his office. Mr. Thorne, you called the right man. I do not do sentiment. I believe in progress. If people cannot afford to live in my buildings, that is their problem, not mine. I just cut off my own brother for being a financial drain. I have zero tolerance for dead weight. There was a pause on the line. A long silence that made Darius sweat. Then Thorne spoke again, his voice sounding oddly satisfied. That is exactly what my client wanted to hear. Ruthlessness is a rare commodity these days. We will be sending over the preliminary contracts this afternoon. Welcome to the big leagues, Mr. King. The line went dead. Darius stared at his phone, his heart pounding like a drum. He stood up and let out a shout of victory that startled his assistant outside. He had done it. He had landed the whale. He walked over to the window and looked down at the city. He felt like a king. He felt invincible. He thought about Marcus probably sleeping in a gutter somewhere and smiled. Getting rid of that loser really had changed his luck. He was finally going to be as rich as he always acted. I walked into the glass-walled lobby of King Realty, knowing exactly what I was walking into. The air conditioning was set to a crisp 68 degrees, and the whole place smelled like ambition and expensive cologne. I was wearing my most faded pair of jeans and a t-shirt with a hole in the collar. I looked like exactly what they thought I was, a desperate man begging for scraps. Darius was standing by the reception desk laughing with a group of junior brokers. He was wearing a suit that was too tight in the chest, trying to look like a linebacker in Italian wool. When he saw me, the laughter died in his throat. He said something to the brokers and they scattered, leaving us alone in the echoing lobby. "What are you doing here, Marcus?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "I told you I am not a bank. If you are here for money, you are wasting my oxygen." "I am not here for a handout, Darius," I said, keeping my eyes on the polished marble floor. "I am here for a job, any job. I have a $50,000 debt hanging over my head. Nia took everything. I just need to work. I will paint. I will move furniture. I will clean." Darius looked at me with a mixture of pity and disgust. He checked his watch, probably making sure none of his high-end clients were due to walk through the door. "You want a job?" he repeated. "At my firm. Marcus, look at you. You are a walking liability. I am closing a deal with a massive investment fund called Phoenix Rising. These people are billionaires. I cannot have my brother, the handyman, loitering in the lobby looking like a vagrant." Just then, the click-clack of high heels echoed from the hallway. Tiffany emerged holding a clipboard and looking stressed. She saw me and her eyes narrowed into slits. "Why is he still here, Darius?" she demanded, not even addressing me directly. "The investors could call at any minute. Get him out. He wants a job." "Tiff." Darius said, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "He says he will do anything, even clean." Tiffany stopped. A slow, malicious idea seemed to dawn on her face. She looked me up and down, assessing me like a piece of damaged furniture she found on the curb. Anything she asked. Anything, I replied, swallowing my pride. She tapped her chin with a gold pen. "Well, we did just fire the cleaning crew to cut costs before the merger. The bathrooms on the executive floor are a disaster, especially Darius' private suite." She walked over to a closet behind the reception desk and rummaged around for a moment. She came back holding a wad of gray fabric. It was an old janitorial jumpsuit, probably left behind by the previous maintenance guy. It was stained with bleach and grease and had the name Earl stitched on the pocket. "Put this on," she ordered, throwing it at me. "I am not having you walk around in those street clothes. If anyone asks, you are Earl the Temp. You are not Darius' brother. You are not family. You are help. And Marcus, if I see a single speck of dust on the gold fixtures in the executive washroom, you are fired without pay." I took the jumpsuit. The fabric felt rough and cheap in my hands. I looked at Darius, waiting for him to object, to tell his wife that making his brother wear a stranger's dirty uniform was a step too far. But he just shrugged and turned back to his phone. $7 an hour, Marcus Darius said. "Take it or leave it, and use the service elevator. I do not want you seen in the glass lift." I went into the closet and pulled the jumpsuit over my clothes. It was too short in the legs and tight in the shoulders. I looked ridiculous. I looked broken. I walked out and grabbed the mop bucket. Tiffany pointed toward the back hallway. "Executive suite is on the top floor. Start with the toilets. And Marcus, do not make eye contact with the brokers. You are invisible. I pushed the bucket toward the service elevator. The wheels squeaked loudly in the silent lobby. I could feel their eyes on my back. They were laughing. They thought they had reduced me to nothing. They thought I was scrubbing their floors to survive. They had no idea I was the one signing their paychecks. As the elevator doors closed, shutting out their smug faces, I gripped the mop handle. I would clean their toilets. I would scrub their floors. I would be the best invisible janitor they ever had. Because every stain I wiped away was just another zero added to the price they were going to pay when I finally decided to speak. I was on my knees scrubbing a coffee stain out of the white carpet in Darius's office when he walked in. He did not even look down. He stepped right over my hand like I was a piece of office equipment. He threw his jacket on the leather sofa and slammed his phone down on the desk, hitting the speaker button. The dial tone purred for a second, before Tiffany picked up. "Babe, did they call?" she asked, her voice shrill with anticipation. "They called," Darius said, leaning back in his chair and putting his feet up on the desk right above where I was cleaning. Thorne sent over the preliminary agreement. Phoenix Rising is in. They are ready to sign on the Meridian deal and they want to expand. They have deep pockets, Tiff. Deeper than we thought. I kept scrubbing, keeping my head down. The smell of industrial carpet cleaner burned my nose, but I did not dare cough. I needed to hear this. "How deep?" Tiffany asked. "Unlimited." Darius grinned at the ceiling. "They are looking for land for a mixed-use development. And that gives me an idea. You remember that swampland down in South Fulton? The one Mom has been trying to get rid of for years. The one that floods every time it rains. The money pit." Tiffany laughed. "What about it?" "I'm going to package it," Darius said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I set up a shell company yesterday. We buy the land from Mom for peanuts, say 50,000. Then I produce a fake appraisal. I know a guy who owes me a favor. We value it at $2 million as prime commercial real estate. Then I sell it to Phoenix Rising as a golden opportunity." I froze. My hands stopped moving. They were planning to defraud my company. They were going to sell me my own mother's worthless swampland for 40 times its value. "Darius is not that risky," Tiffany asked, but she did not sound worried. She sounded excited. "What if they check?" "They will not check." Darius scoffed. "Thorne said they want speed. They are throwing cash around like it is confetti. By the time they realize the land is underwater, we will be cashing the check in the Caymans. And the best part is, I get the commission on both sides, plus the profit from the flip. We are going to be rich, Tiff. Real rich. Not just leased car rich." "I love it when you talk dirty," Tiffany purred. "Buy the land from your mom today. Tell her it is for a tax write-off so she does not ask questions." Darius looked down at me then. For a second I thought he had caught me listening, but his eyes just slid over me, glazed with greed. "Hey, Earl," he shouted, kicking at my foot. "You missed a spot over there. And hurry up. I have a fraud to commit. I mean a deal to close." He laughed at his own joke. I scrubbed the spot he pointed to. The fibers of the carpet were rough under my fingers. I was not just cleaning a rug anymore. I was polishing the trapdoor they were about to fall through. They were trying to hustle the hustler. They were trying to sell a swamp to the man who owned the water. Go ahead, Darius, I thought. Buy the land. Forge the appraisal. Dig your grave a little deeper. I will be right here ready to fill it in. I walked out of the service entrance of King Realty, peeling off the sweaty janitor jumpsuit. My back ached from scrubbing grout, but my mind was racing with the intel I had gathered on Darius's fraud. Dante was waiting for me in the parking lot, leaning against the hood of his rusted Civic. He looked tired, but he offered me a smile that disappeared the moment the glass doors of the lobby flew open. Tiffany stormed out like a hurricane in Louboutins. She was clutching her left earlobe, and her face was twisted in a mask of panic and rage. Darius followed close behind, trying to calm her down, but she shoved him away. "It is gone, Darius," she shrieked. "My diamond stud. The 2-carat one. It was in my ear when I walked into the lobby, and now it is gone." She scanned the pavement frantically until her eyes landed on Dante. He was standing 10 feet away, just minding his business, waiting for his cousin. But to Tiffany, he was not family. He was a suspect. She pointed a manicured finger at him, her nail like a dagger. "You!" she screamed, marching toward him. "You stole it!" Dante blinked, stepping back from her aggression. "Excuse me, Tiffany, I just got here. I have not moved from this spot." "Do not lie to me, you little thug," she spat, getting right in his face. "I saw you lurking near the entrance earlier. You probably found it on the ground and pocketed it. Empty your pockets. Right now." I stepped forward, instinct taking over. "Tiffany, back off. He has been standing by his car for 5 minutes. He did not touch your jewelry." "Shut up, Earl," she snapped, using my janitor name. "This does not concern the help." She turned back to Dante, grabbing the fabric of his hoodie. "Give it back. I know you people. You see something shiny and you think you deserve it. You are probably going to pawn it for rent money." Dante brushed her hand away, his face tightening. "Do not touch me, Tiffany. I said I do not have your earring. Check your purse. Check your car. But get your hands off me." Darius stepped in then. He saw his wife being defied by a kid who drove a car worth less than his shoes, and something in him snapped. He did not ask questions. He did not look for evidence. He just reacted with the entitlement of a man who believed he was untouchable. "Do not you dare touch my wife!" Darius roared. He swung his hand. The sound of the slap was sickeningly loud, a wet, sharp crack that echoed across the empty parking lot. Dante stumbled back, holding his cheek, his eyes wide with shock. A trickle of blood appeared at the corner of his lip. Darius stood over him, chest heaving, adjusting his expensive suit jacket. "You learn your place, boy. When my wife tells you to empty your pockets, you empty them. You are lucky I do not call the cops and have them strip search you right here on the asphalt." I froze. Every muscle in my body locked up. I wanted to tear Darius apart. I wanted to scream that I owned him, that I could buy and sell his entire life 10 times over. But I saw Dante look at me. He shook his head just a fraction of an inch. He knew the plan. He took the hit so I could keep my cover. Just then the parking lot lights flickered on. The sudden illumination caught a sparkle inside Tiffany's white Mercedes, parked just a few feet away. There on the driver's side floor mat, glinting innocently under the leather seat, was the diamond earring. She must have knocked it loose when she got out of the car. I walked over and pointed at it. "There," I said, my voice low and shaking with suppressed rage. "It is in your car, Tiffany. It fell on the floor mat. He did not steal it." Tiffany looked. She saw the diamond. She did not apologize. She did not look ashamed. She just huffed and opened the car door, retrieving her jewelry as if nothing had happened. "Well," she said, fastening it back into her ear. He looked guilty. He should not have been standing there looking like a criminal if he did not want to get treated like one. "Come on, Darius. We have dinner reservations." Darius gave Dante one last sneer. "Consider that a warning," he said. "Stay away from my property." They got into the Mercedes and drove off, leaving us standing in the exhaust fumes. Dante spat a mouthful of blood onto the pavement. He touched his swelling cheek and looked at me. His eyes were not fearful. They were hard. "Add it to the bill, Marcus," he said, his voice thick. "Add that slap to the bill." I looked at the blood on the ground. I looked at the taillights of my brother's car, fading into the Atlanta night. The bill was getting high, and I was going to collect every single penny with interest. I sat in the back of my service van, staring at the cracked screen of my burner phone, waiting for it to ring. I had instructed Thorne to time the delivery perfectly. Just as the sun hit the potholes in the parking lot of Dante's apartment complex, the flatbed truck should be pulling in. At 9:00 sharp, my phone vibrated so hard it rattled against the metal shelf. It was Dante. I picked up and had to pull the phone away from my ear immediately. He was screaming. Not in pain, but in pure, unadulterated joy. "Marcus. Marcus, you are not going to believe this. You are never going to believe what just happened." I played the part. "What is going on, Dante? Is it the police? Did Darius call you again?" "No, man, forget Darius. Forget everything. I am outside my apartment right now. A truck just pulled up. A massive flatbed. And there is a guy in a suit standing here holding a clipboard. He just handed me keys, Marcus. Keys to a brand new car. I smiled at the rusty ceiling of my van. A brand new car, I repeated. What kind of car? It is a 2025 Toyota Camry XSE hybrid. Dante shouted, his voice cracking. It is midnight black, Marcus. Leather interior, panoramic glass roof. It has 0 miles on the odometer. It smells like a factory. The guy said it is part of some random driver appreciation sweepstakes from a partner company. He said I was randomly selected based on my high ratings. I could hear him running his hand over the metal through the phone. I had told Thorne to make sure the paperwork was ironclad. A fake contest from a shell corporation tied to the rideshare industry. It looked 100% legitimate. This changes everything, Marcus, Dante said, and now he was crying. I can hear the tears choking him up. I can drive Uber Black with this. I can double my rates. No more breakdowns, no more oil leaks. I can actually save money now. God is looking out for us, man. I swear he is. After everything that happened with Tiffany yesterday, I thought I was cursed. But look at this. I swallowed the lump in my throat. It was not God, Dante. It was your cousin paying back a debt that meant more than money. But I could not tell him that yet. You deserve it, Dante, I said softly. You are a good man. Good things happen to good people eventually. I am coming to get you, he said. I am going to pick you up in style. We are going to get lunch, my treat. No, I said quickly. Enjoy the car, man. Break it in. I have some leads on a job I need to chase down. Just promise me one thing. Do not let Darius or Tiffany near it. Do not let them touch the door handle. They will never touch this, Dante vowed. This is ours, Marcus. This is the start of something new. He hung up, still laughing with disbelief. I sat back, feeling the first real warmth I had felt in days. Darius had slapped him. I had given him a future. And the best part was that Darius was going to see that shiny new car, and it was going to drive him absolutely insane, wondering how a broke college dropout got lucky while his own empire was built on lies. I stood in the corner of my mother's living room watching a robbery take place in broad daylight. Darius was pacing back and forth on the Persian rug, waving a glossy prospectus in the air like a preacher saving souls. My mother sat on her velvet sofa, clutching a framed photo of my late father, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and greed. Mama, this is it, Darius said, his voice trembling with excitement. This is the big league. Phoenix Rising is not just looking for partners, they are looking for kings. But to sit at the table, I have to show them I am serious. I need liquidity. I need to show good faith capital to cover the initial zoning permits and the consulting fees. It is $100,000, Mama, just a drop in the bucket compared to what we are going to make. Viola looked down at the photo of my father. But honey, that land in South Fulton was your father's pride and joy. He bought those acres with his first bonus check back in '85. He always said that was our safety net. That land was supposed to be where we built the family estate one day. Darius knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. And we will, Mama, but not in a swamp in South Fulton. We are going to build it in Buckhead, in the hills. Dad bought that land so we could have a future, right? Well, the future is here. But I cannot grab it with empty hands. If I do not come up with this cash by Friday, they move on to the next broker. Do you want me to lose this deal? Do you want me to stay small forever? I could not watch it anymore. It was sickening. He was manipulating her insecurities, using our father's memory to fund his own destruction. I stepped forward, my voice rough. Mom, do not do it, I said. Dad made us promise never to sell that land. He said they are not making any more of it. It is the only thing we own free and clear. Darius is gambling with your security. Viola snapped her head toward me, her eyes flashing with sudden anger. She looked at my stained jeans and my work boots, and her expression hardened into a mask of disappointment. Who asked you? Marcus, she spat. What do you know about business? What do you know about building a legacy? You are living in a van eating handouts. Your brother is trying to elevate this family. He is trying to turn dirt into gold. And here you are trying to drag him down just because you are jealous. I am not jealous, Mom, I pleaded. I am trying to protect you. That land is all you have left. If this deal goes south, and deals always go south with Darius, you will have nothing. You will lose the only thing Dad left you. Darius stood up, towering over her like a protective shadow. Do not listen to him, Mama. He has a poverty mindset. He thinks small because he is small. Dad would want us to take risks. He would want us to win. Viola looked from me to Darius. From the failure to the golden child. It was not even a choice for her. She stood up and walked over to the antique desk where she kept her important papers. She pulled out the deed. The paper was yellowed with age, but the stamp was still clear. She handed it to Darius. Do what you have to do, baby, she said, her voice steady. Make us rich. Make your father proud. Darius took the deed, his fingers trembling. He grinned like a wolf who just found an open gate to the sheep pen. I promise, Mama, you will not regret this. I looked at my mother. She avoided my gaze, turning back to the photo of my father. She had just sold his memory to buy a lottery ticket for a game that was already rigged against her. And the worst part was I was the one rigging it. I stood frozen in the hallway, listening to the sound of Darius's car peeling out of the driveway. He was gone, and he had the deed. The silence that filled the house wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like the air before a tornado touches down. My mother Viola was already bustling around the living room, fluffing pillows and straightening the doilies on the armchairs, as if she hadn't just signed away our father's legacy for a pipe dream. Mom, I said, my voice raspy. Do you realize what you just did? That land wasn't just dirt. It was Dad's sweat. It was his retirement. It was supposed to be our safety net. She didn't even look at me. She kept adjusting a porcelain figurine on the mantel. Your father wanted us to prosper, Marcus. He didn't want us holding on to a swamp in South Fulton forever. Darius has a vision. He is going to turn that deed into millions. You should be thanking him, not criticizing him. Thanking him, I stepped closer, my boots leaving faint dusty outlines on her pristine carpet. For what? For gambling with your future. Mom, he is desperate. I saw his eyes. That wasn't confidence. That was panic. He is in debt up to his eyeballs, and he is using you to bail himself out. Viola spun around so fast her pearl necklace clicked against her teeth. Her face was twisted into a sneer I hadn't seen since I dropped out of trade school. Enough, she snapped. I am sick and tired of your negativity. You are jealous, Marcus. That is all this is. You are jealous because your brother wears a suit and makes deals while you crawl around in attics fixing air conditioners. You hate seeing him shine because it reminds you of how dim your own light is. I felt like she had slapped me. I work hard, Mom, I said quietly. I make an honest living. I don't lie. I don't cheat. Doesn't that count for anything in this family? Honesty doesn't pay the mortgage, Marcus, she said, cold as ice. Honesty doesn't get you a table at the country club. Darius is building a dynasty. He is elevating the king name. He needs capital to make us royalty, and you listen to me good. Do not you dare get in his way. Do not you dare block your brother's path with your small-minded fears. You are a dead weight, Marcus. I have carried you long enough. If you can't help us rise, then get out of the way before you drag us all down to the gutter with you. The words hung in the air, vibrating with cruelty. She called me dead weight, her own son, the one who came over to fix her furnace for free last winter, the one who mowed her lawn every Sunday until I got married. To her, I wasn't a person. I was an anchor holding back her ship from coming in. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in years. I didn't see my mother anymore. I saw a stranger blinded by greed and status. I saw a woman who would sell her own soul if it meant she could look down on her neighbors. Okay, Mom, I said. My voice was steady now, the shaking gone. I hear you loud and clear. Darius is the future. I am the anchor. You won't have to worry about me dragging you down anymore. I am glad you finally understand, she said, turning her back on me to admire the photo of Darius on the wall. She didn't even see me leave. I walked out the front door and closed it gently behind me. I didn't slam it. Slamming it would have meant I was angry. I wasn't angry. I was done. The umbilical cord was finally cut. I walked down the driveway past the manicured hedges and the perfectly painted mailbox. I felt lighter. The burden of trying to save them was gone. They wanted to fly into the sun on wings made of wax. Who was I to stop them? I got into my van and drove away without looking in the rearview mirror. Viola King had just lost a son, but she was too busy counting imaginary millions to notice. I was sitting in my van parked behind Dante's apartment complex, eating a lukewarm slice of pizza, when my phone vibrated. It wasn't a call. It was a picture message. I opened it, and the screen lit up with the blinding sparkle of a diamond ring. It was huge, gaudy, and looked like it cost more than the house Nia had just stolen from me. Underneath the photo was a text from Nia. "Look what a real man buys his woman. Dr. Sterling proposed tonight. We are getting married in Paris next month. Thank you for signing those papers so fast. You finally did something useful by getting out of my way. Enjoy your debt, loser." I stared at the message. The diamond was impressive, I had to admit. Sterling must have maxed out every line of credit he had to buy that rock. I zoomed in on the photo. In the background, I could see the interior of a high-end restaurant. Champagne flutes, rose petals on the table. It was the proposal she had always dreamed of. The proposal I couldn't afford to give her 5 years ago when I asked her to marry me with a modest gold band in a public park. For a second, I felt a twinge of the old pain, the feeling of being inadequate, of being less than. But then I remembered the separation of assets agreement. I remembered the LLC paperwork sitting in Thorne's office. And I remembered the fact that Sterling's credit cards were probably melting from overuse. I started to type a reply. I wanted to tell her she was marrying a fraud. I wanted to tell her that her new fiancé was swimming in debt just like Darius. I wanted to tell her that I was sitting on a fortune that would make her diamond look like costume jewelry. But I stopped. My thumb hovered over the send button. No. That would be too easy. That would be mercy. And I was fresh out of mercy. Let her have her moment. Let her preen and gloat. Let her plan her Parisian wedding on credit. The higher she climbed, the harder the fall would be. And when she hit the ground, I wanted her to know exactly what she had thrown away. I deleted my draft. Instead, I typed 2 words. "Congratulations, Nia." I hit send. It was the perfect response. It gave her nothing. No anger, no jealousy, just indifference. I knew it would drive her crazy. She wanted a reaction. She wanted me to beg or scream. By giving her nothing, I was taking back my power. I put the phone down and took another bite of pizza. It wasn't gourmet. It wasn't served on china, but it tasted good. It tasted like patience. Nia thought she had won the lottery by trading me for a doctor with a leased lifestyle. She had no idea she had just folded a winning hand to pick up a joker. Enjoy Paris, Nia, I thought. Because when you get back, reality is going to be waiting at the airport with the eviction notice and a mountain of debt. And I will be watching from the penthouse. The matte black box arrived at Darius's office via a private courier who looked more like a Secret Service agent than a delivery driver. He wore an earpiece and carried the package with gloved hands, requiring a digital signature and a thumbprint scan before he would release it. Darius signed his hand, shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the electric anticipation of being chosen. He carried the box to his desk and set it down on the mahogany surface, clearing away the stack of overdue notices he had been ignoring all morning. The box was heavy, substantial. It felt expensive. He pulled the silk ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of midnight blue velvet, lay a thick slab of metal. It wasn't paper. It was a solid plate of brushed steel dipped in 24-karat gold along the edges. The text was laser engraved into the surface. Phoenix Rising Investment Group cordially invites Mr. and Mrs. Darius King to the inaugural gala. The location was the St. Regis. The date was tomorrow night. At the bottom in bold lettering it read, VIP access only, non-transferable. Darius picked it up, feeling the cold weight of wealth in his palm. This wasn't just an invitation, it was a coronation. It was proof that he had finally arrived. He hit the intercom button on his desk, his voice trembling with excitement. "Tiffany, get in here, now. You need to see this." Tiffany walked in, looking bored, scrolling through Instagram on her phone. She looked up and froze, her eyes locked onto the gold plate in Darius's hand. "Is that?" She started, her voice trailing off. "Solid gold." Darius finished for her, a grin splitting his face. "Or close enough. Look who just got invited to the most exclusive event in Atlanta. Phoenix Rising isn't just signing a deal with us, Tiff. They are bringing us into the fold. This is the inner circle." Tiffany rushed over, grabbing the invitation. She ran a manicured nail over the engraved letters. "The St. Regis," she whispered. "Darius, do you know who goes to these parties? Tech billionaires, politicians, athletes. We are going to be in the same room as the people who run this city. We belong in that room," Darius said, leaning back in his chair and putting his feet up on the desk. "We are the power couple of Atlanta real estate now. This deal with the land is just the beginning. Once we charm the chairman of Phoenix Rising, we are set for life. I heard he is some reclusive genius from Silicon Valley. If we get in good with him, we are untouchable." Tiffany was already typing furiously on her phone. "I need a dress," she said, her eyes manic with greed. "Not just a dress. I need a gown. Something that says I own the building. I am calling the personal shopper at Neiman Marcus. And I need a stylist for my hair. And a makeup artist." "Darius, this is going to cost a fortune. Spend it," Darius said, waving his hand dismissively. "Put it all on the business card. Who cares? We are about to be millionaires, Tiff. We have to look the part. You cannot walk into a gold-plated party looking like a suburban housewife. I want you to shine. I want everyone in that room to know that the kings have arrived." He stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the city skyline. He felt like a titan. He felt invincible. He thought about Marcus probably scrubbing a toilet somewhere right now for $7 an hour. He laughed a low, cruel sound. Poor Marcus. He was down in the dirt while Darius was soaring in the clouds. He had won. He had actually won. And tomorrow night, he was going to collect his prize. Tiffany stood in front of the mirror at the high-end rental boutique, twirling in a dress that shimmered like liquid silver. It was a couture gown, backless, with a train that pooled on the floor like mercury. The rental fee for one night was $5,000 more than I had made in the last 3 months combined. She looked at her reflection with a hunger that was almost frightening. "It is perfect," she declared, snapping her fingers at the sales assistant. "Wrap it up. And add the diamond clutch. I need accessories that scream old money." She pulled out Darius' corporate credit card without hesitation. It was maxed out, but she knew the transaction would go through because Darius had called the bank that morning and authorized an emergency overdraft, claiming it was for client acquisition expenses. Technically, she was right. She was acquiring a client. She was just planning to fleece him blind. As she was signing the receipt, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and smiled a cold, predatory smile. It was the event coordinator for the gala, sending over the final logistics. "Valet services provided by Elite Parking Solutions." She tapped a contact on her phone. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I was in the middle of a fitting for my own tuxedo, but I answered, trying to sound out of breath. "Hello, Tiffany," I said, keeping my voice subservient. "Earl," she barked, not even bothering with my real name anymore. "I have a job for you tonight, a special assignment. Darius got you a spot with the valet crew at the St. Regis. One of the guys called in sick. It pays $20 an hour plus tips." I held the phone away from my ear, suppressing a laugh. She was trying to get me a job parking my own cars at my own party. $20 an hour, I repeated, acting grateful. "That is great, Tiffany. Thank you." Do not thank me, she snapped. Just show up. And Marcus, make sure you look presentable. This is a black tie event. I do not want you showing up in those disgusting coveralls. Wear a white shirt and black pants. And for God's sake, shave. I do not want my friends seeing my brother-in-law looking like a werewolf. She hung up before I could respond. I looked at myself in the mirror of the private tailoring suite at Tom Ford. I was wearing a midnight blue velvet tuxedo jacket that fit like a second skin. My beard was trimmed to perfection. I looked like a werewolf who had just bought the moon. I turned to the tailor who was adjusting my cuffs. Pack it up, I said, and throw in a cheap white shirt and black polyester pants. I have a shift to work before the party starts. The tailor looked confused but nodded. Very good, sir. Will you be wearing the Patek Philippe watch? Not yet, I said, smiling at my reflection. That comes later. Right now I have to go park some cars. I walked out of the store carrying 2 bags. One held a $5,000 tuxedo. The other held a $20 waiter's uniform. Tiffany thought she was sending me to the bottom of the ladder to humiliate me. She had no idea she was giving me the perfect vantage point to watch her climb up the gallows I had built for her. I would park her car, I would open her door, and then I would close the trap. Nia showed up at Darius' house 2 hours before the gala, looking like a woman on the edge of a nervous breakdown. She was wearing a red dress that was too tight and too short for a black tie event, trying desperately to look like money she did not have. She practically fell to her knees in the foyer, clutching her fake Chanel purse with white knuckles, while Darius adjusted his silk bow tie in the hallway mirror. Darius, please, Nia begged, her voice trembling with desperation. I saw the post on Instagram. The Phoenix Rising Gala. This is the biggest event of the decade. You have to let me come with you. I need this. Darius laughed, checking his reflection from a different angle. You need this. Why? So you can hunt for another husband. I thought Dr. Sterling was the love of your life. He is cheap. Nia spat, her veneer of happiness cracking instantly. He counts pennies. He drives a leased Porsche. I need real money, Darius. The kind of money that will be in that room tonight. I did what you said. I got rid of Marcus. I cut the dead weight. Now help me up. I deserve a seat at the table. Darius turned to look at her, his expression filled with cold amusement. You deserve nothing, Nia. You are a +1 of a +1. A hanger-on. But I suppose it does not hurt to have beautiful women surrounding me. It makes me look powerful. However, there are conditions. He pointed a finger at Tiffany, who was descending the stairs in her $5,000 silver gown looking like a dangerous Mercury statue. Tonight is Tiffany night, Darius said. She is the queen. You are the subject. If you want to ride in the limo, you do what she says. You fetch her drinks. You hold her purse when she goes to the dance floor. You make sure she looks good. And if she tells you to jump, you ask how high. Do you understand? Nia looked at Tiffany. The two women had always had a rivalry, a cold war fought with passive-aggressive compliments and side-eye. Now Nia had to surrender completely. She had to become a servant to the woman she envied most, just for a chance to breathe the same air as billionaires. Tiffany smiled, a slow, cruel curving of her lips as she reached the bottom step. Oh, I like this idea. I need someone to manage my train. It is very heavy. And my glass should never be empty, Nia. Not once. If I have to wait for champagne, you are walking home, and try to stand in the back during photos. That red dress is tacky. Nia swallowed hard. I could almost imagine her pride sliding down her throat like broken glass. She smoothed her dress and forced a smile that looked like a grimace of pain. Whatever you want, Tiffany, she said, her voice hollow. I am just happy to be included. Darius clapped his hands together, looking delighted by the submission. Perfect. Now go wait in the car. And Nia, sit in the front with the driver. I do not want your perfume clashing with Tiffany's scent in the back. Nia walked out the door, her head bowed. She had traded her dignity for a ticket to a party where the host was the man she had thrown away. She thought she was climbing the social ladder, but she was really just stepping onto the trapdoor I had greased for her. She was willing to be a slave for a night of luxury, unaware that the man she called a failure was the one paying for the champagne she would be fetching. "Get in the van, Dante. We have a stop to make before the party." Dante hopped in looking nervous. He was wearing his best shirt, but it was wrinkled and a size too big. He kept checking his reflection in the side mirror, trying to flatten his collar. "Where are we going, Marcus?" he asked. "I thought we were just going to watch from the parking lot. You know, see Darius make a fool of himself from a distance." "Change of plans," I said, turning the key. "We are not watching from the parking lot. We are going inside, and we are not going in looking like this." I drove not to the St. Regis but to the Buckhead shops. I pulled the rusted service van right up to the curb in front of the Tom Ford boutique, parking it directly between a Bentley and a Ferrari. The contrast was aggressive, a stain on a silk sheet. Dante looked out the window, his eyes wide with panic. "Marcus, you cannot park here. Security will be on us in seconds. They tow cars like this for sport in this neighborhood." "Let them come," I said, stepping out. I walked to the glass doors, my work boots heavy on the pavement. The security guard stepped forward, his hand raising to stop me, his face setting into a sneer he reserved for people he thought could not afford the air inside. Then he saw my face. I had called ahead. I had spoken to the regional manager. The guard froze. He lowered his hand and opened the door wide. "Mr. King," he said, his voice respectful. "They are expecting you in the private suite." Dante followed me inside, looking like he was walking on a minefield. He kept his hands close to his sides, afraid to touch anything. The air inside smelled of leather and sandalwood money and silence. It was a different world. A man in an impeccable suit approached us holding a tray of espresso. "Mr. King, welcome back. And this must be Mr. Dante." "Fix him," I said, pointing to my cousin. "The full treatment. Hair, shave, and the suit we discussed. I want him to look like he owns the building." For the next hour, we were not Marcus the HVAC guy and Dante the Uber driver. We were clay being molded. A barber with a straight razor shaved off my weeks of stubble, revealing a jawline I had not seen in years. Hot towels steamed away the grime of the crawl spaces, the smell of grease and failure. Dante sat in the chair next to me, watching his dreads get retwisted and styled into something regal. When we stood up, we looked different. Cleaner, sharper. But the real transformation happened in the fitting room. I put on the midnight blue velvet tuxedo. It fit like armor. Dante stepped out wearing a charcoal gray three-piece suit that made him look like a young executive, not a college dropout struggling to pay rent. He stood in front of the three-way mirror staring at himself. He touched the lapel, his hands trembling. "Marcus," he whispered, "I have never looked like this. I look like somebody, like a real person." "You have always been a real person, Dante," I said, standing behind him. "Now you just have the uniform to match." The manager cleared his throat politely, holding a leather folio. "The total comes to $22,400, sir." Dante spun around, his face going pale. 22,000. "Marcus, run. We have to run. We cannot pay that." I did not run. I reached into the pocket of my old jeans, which were lying in a pile on the floor. I pulled out a card. It was heavy, made of anodized titanium. Black. Matte. The American Express Centurion. The black card. Dante stopped breathing. He stared at the card, then at me, then back at the card. His eyes were huge. "Is that?" he choked out. "Is that real?" "It is real," I said, handing it to the manager without flinching. "And it is ours." The manager swiped it. The machine beeped, approved. The sound was sweeter than any music. I turned to Dante. "Darius called us trash. Nia called us losers. Tonight we walk into that room and we show them exactly who we are. We are not just kings by name anymore, cousin. We are kings by bank account." Dante looked at me, a slow grin spreading across his face, replacing the shock. He straightened his tie, adjusting it with a newfound confidence. "Let us go take our throne," he said. We walked out of the store, leaving the old clothes, the old lives in a pile on the floor. The van was still outside, but we walked right past it to the black town car the boutique had arranged. It was time to go to the party. The white stretch Hummer limousine looked ridiculous parked among the understated elegance of the Bentleys and Rolls-Royces lining the circular driveway of the St. Regis. It was a relic from a prom night 10 years ago, loud and tacky, but to Darius it was the chariot of kings. The driver, a tired-looking man in an ill-fitting cap, hurried around to open the back door, but he was not fast enough for Darius. Darius kicked the door open from the inside, nearly hitting the valet stand. He emerged, straightening his jacket and inhaling the air as if it were scented with money. He did not thank the driver. He did not even acknowledge his existence. He just snapped his fingers at the nearest bellhop. "You there?" Darius barked, pointing at a speck of dust on his shoe that probably did not exist. "My wife is coming out. Make sure the red carpet is actually clean. I do not want her dragging a $5,000 train through street grit." Tiffany stepped out next. She paused on the running board, waiting for a paparazzi flash that never came. She looked stunning in the silver gown, but her face was twisted into a sneer of perpetual dissatisfaction. She handed her empty champagne flute to the driver without looking at him, treating him like a human trash can. Nia scrambled out after her, struggling with Tiffany's heavy train and her own too-short dress. She looked exhausted already, but she plastered a desperate smile on her face. "Careful," Tiffany snapped, not even turning around. "If you rip that hem, you are paying for it. And I know you cannot afford it." Viola brought up the rear, clutching her purse like it held the nuclear codes. She looked around at the gold leaf detailing of the hotel entrance and let out a sigh of pure contentment. "Now this is where we belong," she said loud enough for the couple walking past to hear. "This is Class Darius, not like that dump your brother calls a life. I am so glad we left the dead weight behind. Imagine Marcus trying to get in here. Security would tackle him before he touched the door handle." Darius laughed, slipping his arm around his mother. "Do not mention his name, Mom. Bad luck. Tonight is about winners." He walked up to the head valet, a distinguished older man, who had likely parked cars for presidents. Darius tossed the limo keys at him. The man caught them with practiced ease, but his eyes hardened. "Keep it close," Darius ordered. "I might need to leave in a hurry to celebrate closing the biggest deal this city has ever seen. And do not scratch it. That is a rental, but my insurance deductible is worth more than your life." The valet did not blink. He just bowed his head slightly, a gesture of professional patience, not respect. "Very good, sir. Enjoy your evening." They swept into the lobby, a whirlwind of expensive perfume and unearned arrogance. They walked past the check-in desk, their heels clicking loudly on the marble. They looked at the other guests with critical eyes, judging suits and jewelry, desperate to prove they were the richest people in the room. They had no idea that the man watching them from the security monitors upstairs was not just richer. He was the one paying for the floor they were walking on. They were peacocks strutting into a slaughterhouse, and they thought they were the butchers. They huffed at the hostess, demanding the VIP entrance lane, bypassing a line of people who actually had invites in their hands. They were high on the fumes of a victory they had not even won yet. Tiffany stopped in the middle of the crowded driveway, her eyes locking onto a figure standing near the valet booth. He was turned away, wearing the standard black vest and white shirt of the parking staff, but there was something familiar about the set of his shoulders, something about the way he stood that reminded her of a problem she thought she had already solved. She squinted through the bright lights of the hotel entrance. It couldn't be. Marcus was supposed to be parking cars in the back lot, hidden away from the guests. Why was he standing here near the VIP entrance looking like he belonged? A sudden wave of irritation washed over her. She had specifically told the valet manager to keep the new guy out of sight. She didn't want to run the risk of seeing her brother-in-law's pathetic face while she was trying to network with billionaires. It would ruin the aesthetic. "Hey," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You, the new guy." The figure didn't turn around. He just stood there checking a clipboard. Tiffany marched over her silver gown, rustling angrily. She didn't tap him on the shoulder. She didn't say, "Excuse me." She reached into her clutch, pulled out the heavy key fob to the rented limo, and threw it. It clattered onto the pavement right next to the man's shoe. A black polished shoe, not a scuffed work boot. But Tiffany was too angry to notice details. "Pick it up," she ordered, pointing at the ground. "I said pick it up." "I know it is you, Marcus. Do not pretend you do not hear me. I told you to stay in the back. You are embarrassing me. Go park the limo. And do not scratch it, or I will have your tips garnished for a year." The man slowly turned around. It wasn't Marcus. It was a 20-year-old college student named Kevin, with acne scars and a name tag that was crooked. He looked down at the keys, then up at Tiffany, his eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Ma'am," he stammered, "I am sorry. I do not think I can park that. I am just checking the list." "I do not care what you think you can do," Tiffany hissed, stepping closer until she was invading his personal space. "I paid for VIP service. That means when I drop my keys, you pick them up. Now, before I call your manager and have you fired. Do you know who my husband is? He is about to own half this city. So bend down and do your job." Kevin looked around for help. The other valets were busy. The guests were staring. He looked like he was about to cry. Slowly, humiliatingly, he bent his knees. He reached for the keys, his hand shaking. Tiffany smiled a look of pure, triumphant malice. "That is right. Know your place. Tell Marcus I said hello when you see him in the break room. Tell him he missed a spot on my rug." Just as Kevin's fingers brushed the plastic fob, a black leather boot stepped onto it. Firmly, deliberately. "Leave it, Kevin." The voice was deep calm and terrifyingly familiar. Tiffany's head snapped up. Standing behind Kevin, emerging from the shadows of a pillar, was another man. He was wearing a valet uniform too, but he wore it differently. He didn't look like a servant. He looked like a soldier in disguise. It was Marcus. But not the Marcus she knew. His beard was gone. His hair was sharp. And his eyes were cold enough to freeze fire. "Hello, Tiffany," he said. "You dropped something." Tiffany stared. For a second she was speechless. Then the old arrogance came rushing back like a flood. "So you finally showed your face," she sneered. "I was wondering where you were hiding. Good. You are here. Pick up the keys, Marcus. Kevin is clearly incompetent. Park the car, and make sure you put a seat cover down. I do not want the driver's seat smelling like failure." I looked at the keys under my boot. I looked at Tiffany in her $5,000 dress. I looked at Kevin still crouching on the ground. "No," I said. Tiffany blinked. "Excuse me?" I said no, I repeated. "I am not parking your car. And neither is Kevin. You can park it yourself, or you can leave." Tiffany laughed, a high-pitched, incredulous sound. "You cannot say no to me. I am a guest. You are an employee. Do it, or I will have you fired right now. I will scream so loud every rich person in this hotel will know your name." I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Go ahead, Tiffany. Scream. Let everyone hear you. Let them see exactly who you are. Because the only person getting fired tonight isn't me." I kicked the keys. They skittered across the pavement, sliding under the limo. "Oops," I said. "Looks like you have to crawl for them now." Tiffany's face turned purple. She opened her mouth to unleash a torrent of abuse, but before she could speak, Darius grabbed her arm. He had been watching from the steps, his face pale. "Tiffany, stop," he hissed, dragging her away. "People are watching. Just leave it. We will deal with him later." She resisted for a moment, glaring at me with pure hate. Then she let Darius pull her toward the entrance, leaving the keys in the dirt. "You are dead, Marcus," she whispered as she passed. Dead. I watched them go. They thought they were walking into a party. They were walking into a cage. And I had just locked the door. I helped Kevin up and patted him on the shoulder. "Go take a break, kid," I said. "I will cover this." Kevin looked at me with awe. "Who are you?" he asked. "Just a guy who is tired of bending over," I said. "Now go. The show is about to start." I stood in the center of the presidential suite on the penthouse floor of the St. Regis, holding a glass of amber scotch that was older than my marriage. The room was a palace of marble and velvet, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a god's-eye view of the city I now secretly owned a piece of. But my attention wasn't on the skyline. It was fixed on the bank of high-definition security monitors I had paid the hotel manager $5,000 to install for the evening. On screen 4, the drama in the driveway was playing out in silent black and white. I watched as Tiffany spun around, her face contorted in a mask of pure venom, ready to deliver one final insult to the man she thought was me. She lunged forward, grabbing the shoulder of the valet who was kneeling to inspect the keys she had kicked. "Get up, Marcus," she was undoubtedly screaming. "Look at me when I am destroying you." The figure stood up slowly and turned around. The camera zoomed in, capturing the precise moment Tiffany's soul left her body. It wasn't me. I was 30 floors above her, breathing conditioned air and drinking top-shelf liquor. The man she had just berated, the man she had thrown keys at, was a 60-year-old Haitian immigrant named Jean who had worked at the hotel for 20 years. I watched Tiffany freeze. Her mouth hung open mid-scream. The guests waiting for their cars stared at her with open disgust. A woman in a fur coat whispered something to her husband, and they both stepped away from Tiffany, as if stupidity were contagious. Tiffany looked around wildly, searching the shadows, her eyes darting back and forth. She looked like a trapped animal, realizing the cage door had been shut for hours. She had to bend down. I watched with a dark satisfaction as she lowered herself in that $5,000 gown, her knees cracking on the pavement to pick up her own keys from the dirt. She dusted them off, her movements jerky and humiliated. Darius grabbed her elbow, roughly dragging her away from the scene, his head lowered, trying to hide from the judgment of the crowd. I took a slow sip of the scotch. It burned pleasantly going down. "You are chasing ghosts, Tiffany," I whispered to the screen. "You are fighting a war with a man who isn't even on the battlefield anymore." I turned away from the monitors and walked to the balcony. The wind whipped my tuxedo shirt, but I didn't feel the cold. I felt powerful. I felt inevitable. They were inside now, walking toward the ballroom, thinking they were guests of honor. They didn't know they were the main course. I finished my drink and set the glass down on the railing. It was time to go downstairs and show them what a real billionaire looks like. The double doors to the grand ballroom swung open, and for a moment my family actually stopped breathing. It was like stepping inside a diamond. The ceiling soared 40 feet overhead, dripping with chandeliers that looked like frozen waterfalls of crystal. The walls were draped in silk the color of champagne, and the tables were set with enough gold leaf to pay off the national debt of a small country. In the center of the room, an ice sculpture of a phoenix rose 10 feet into the air, its wings spread wide, melting slowly into a pool of chilled vodka. Viola stepped onto the plush carpet first, her heels sinking into the deep pile. She clutched her chest, her eyes wide and hungry, reflecting the sparkle of the room. I could see her doing the math in her head, calculating the cost of the flowers, the linens, the air itself. She let out a small whimper of pure materialistic ecstasy. "This is it," she whispered loud enough for the doorman to hear. "This is heaven. We made it, Darius. We actually made it." Darius walked in next, chest puffed out, trying to look like he owned the place instead of just renting a tuxedo that was a size too small. He scanned the room, not for beauty, but for targets. He was looking for the man who would sign the check. He snapped his fingers at a passing waiter who was carrying a silver tray laden with flutes of vintage Dom Perignon. "You there," Darius commanded, grabbing 2 glasses at once. "Keep them coming. It is going to be a long night of celebrating." He downed the first glass in one gulp like it was Gatorade after a workout. He didn't taste the notes of brioche and honey. He just tasted the price tag. He handed the empty glass back to the startled waiter and started nursing the second one, his eyes darting around the room like a lizard hunting flies. Tiffany swept in behind him, her silver dress catching the light. She looked around with a critical sneer, trying to mask her intimidation with judgment. She picked up a glass of champagne and held it up to the light, inspecting it for flaws that weren't there. A bit tacky, she sniffed, gesturing at the ice sculpture with her free hand. A phoenix? How literal. But I suppose new money always lacks subtlety. I would have gone with orchids. Thousands of them. She took a long swallow, draining half the glass. Her hand was shaking slightly. She was terrified. She knew she didn't belong here among the titans of industry and old money heiresses, but she would die before she admitted it. She grabbed another glass from a passing tray, holding one in each hand like weapons. Nia trailed behind them, looking like a lost child in her red dress. She kept tugging at the hem, trying to pull it down. She looked at the women around her wearing couture gowns that draped elegantly, and she knew instantly she had made a mistake. She grabbed a drink, not to celebrate, but to drown the sudden sharp realization of her own inadequacy. She drank it fast, the bubbles making her cough, then immediately reached for another. They huddled together near the entrance, a tight knot of insecurity and greed. They were drinking the expensive alcohol like it was water, terrified that if they stopped, the illusion would shatter. They laughed too loud. They gestured too broadly. They were trying to fill the massive room with their personalities because deep down they knew they were small. I watched them from the balcony shadows. They thought they were drinking the nectar of the gods. They didn't know they were drinking the last meal of the condemned. Drink up, I thought. Enjoy the buzz. Because the hangover is going to last for the rest of your lives. Dr. Sterling leaned in close to Nia, his arm draped over her shoulder in a display of possession that looked more like a vice grip than a hug. To the rest of the room, they looked like a successful power couple sharing an intimate moment amidst the opulence. But up close, the romance evaporated. Sterling was not whispering sweet nothings. He was interrogating her. His eyes darted around the ballroom, scanning the faces of the elite guests with a mixture of hunger and paranoia. He pulled Nia tighter until she winced slightly, her champagne sloshing dangerously close to the rim of her glass. "Nia, listen to me," he whispered, his voice low and urgent. "I need you to be 100% sure about those divorce papers. Did you get the separation of assets clause in writing? Is it ironclad?" Nia looked confused, her smile faltering. She took a nervous sip of her drink. "Of course I am sure, baby. I told you. Marcus signed everything. He took the debt. I took the house. He waived all rights to future assets. Why are you asking me this now? We are at the party of the century. We should be celebrating." Sterling did not relax. He looked toward the stage where the podium stood empty, waiting for the mysterious host. "I am asking because people are talking, Nia. I heard rumors in the VIP lounge. Nobody knows who this chairman is. He is a ghost. They say he is local. They say he came into money fast and he is using it to settle scores." He looked back at her, his eyes cold and calculating. "If this guy decides to vet us, I do not want your deadbeat ex-husband dragging my credit score down. If Marcus finds out we are moving up in the world, he might try to claim he was coerced. He could sue for spousal support. I do not want any loose ends." Nia laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that grated on the ears. "Marcus, sue us. Please. He does not have two nickels to rub together. He is probably sleeping in a gutter right now. He is a bug, Sterling. We crushed him. He is not coming back." Sterling nodded slowly, but the tension did not leave his shoulders. "Just make sure. Because money like this does not just appear without a story behind it. And I have a bad feeling that we do not know the whole story yet." They clinked their glasses, a toast to their own perceived safety. They stood there in their rented luxury, surrounded by my money, convinced they were the smartest people in the room. Sterling was right to be paranoid. There was a story behind the money. And he was about to become the villain in the final chapter. The lights in the grand ballroom didn't just dim, they died, plunging the room into a sudden velvet darkness that sucked the air out of the space. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by a silence so heavy it felt like physical weight. The clinking of glasses stopped. The murmurs of business deals and gossip evaporated. For the first time all night, the room was completely still, waiting. From my vantage point in the shadows of the balcony, I looked down at my family. They were a cluster of tension in the center of the room. Darius straightened his tie, his movements jerky and nervous. He was practically vibrating with anticipation, his eyes fixed on the stage, like a starving dog watching a steak. Tiffany smoothed her silver dress for the 1,000th time, her face set in a mask of haughty expectation, though I could see the way her nails dug into Darius's arm. Nia and Dr. Sterling stood slightly behind them, frozen. Even my mother Viola stopped posturing, clutching her purse to her chest, as if it contained the Holy Grail. A single beam of pure white light cut through the darkness, slicing the room in half and illuminating the center of the stage. A man walked out from the wings. He wasn't me. He was the master of ceremonies, a man I had hired specifically for his voice, which sounded like God reading the morning news. He walked to the microphone stand, his footsteps echoing in the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice booming through the massive speakers, vibrating in the chests of everyone present. "Welcome to the dawn of a new era in Atlanta. You have heard the rumors. You have seen the acquisitions. Tonight, we pull back the curtain." Darius leaned forward, lips moving silently. He was probably rehearsing the speech he planned to give when he was inevitably called up to be honored as a key partner. He looked hungry. He looked ready to feast. Tonight, the MC continued, raising a hand toward the massive double doors at the back of the room, the same doors my family had strutted through hours ago with such arrogance. "We invite you to meet the visionaries behind the legend, the architects of the future. Please welcome the chairman and CEO of Phoenix Rising." The music swelled a deep orchestral crescendo that sounded less like a celebration and more like the soundtrack to a judgment day. The spotlight swung away from the stage, slicing through the dark to hit those double doors. They were 12 feet tall, made of mahogany and gold, and for a second they remained closed, holding the tension until it was almost unbearable. Then, slowly, majestically, they began to open. A low mist curled out from the gap, swirling around the entrance like smoke from a fire. The silhouettes of two men appeared in the opening, backlit by a blinding white light that hid their features. They stood there for a heartbeat, faceless, nameless, just shapes in the fog. Darius held his breath. Tiffany leaned forward, squinting. They were expecting a stranger. They were expecting a savior. They were watching the doors open, and they had no idea they were staring directly into the abyss. I stepped out of the blinding white haze and into the grand ballroom, my silhouette sharpening into focus with every deliberate stride. The midnight blue velvet of my Tom Ford tuxedo drank in the spotlight, absorbing the glare rather than reflecting it, making me look like a piece of the night sky cut into the shape of a man. Beside me, Dante matched my pace step for step. He was no longer the kid in the faded hoodie shivering in a parking lot. In his charcoal gray three-piece suit, with his dreads styled back and his chin held high, he looked like royalty. He looked like a prince returning to claim a kingdom he had built himself. We walked down the center aisle, the crowd parting for us like the Red Sea. The orchestral music swelled a thundering pulse that vibrated in the floorboards, but all I could hear was the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat, calm and slow. I did not look left or right. I kept my eyes fixed on the empty podium ahead. I could feel the weight of 300 gazes on me, heavy and curious. They were trying to place me. They were squinting through the dramatic lighting, trying to figure out if they knew the man who walked with such absolute authority. I adjusted the cuff of my jacket, letting the light catch the face of the Patek Philippe watch on my wrist. It was a subtle movement but calculated. The glint of gold and sapphire screamed power louder than any shout. I saw a man in the front row, a banker I recognized from the business news, lean over to his wife and whisper something. He looked confused. He was looking at a man who projected the kind of wealth that moves markets, and he was trying to reconcile that image with a blank space in his memory. Dante walked with a new swagger. The hesitation that came from years of being told he was worthless had evaporated completely. He looked at the crowd not with fear, but with a cool appraisal. He belonged here. We both did. Not because we were invited by some social committee, but because we owned the very ground they stood on. The walk to the stage felt like it spanned a lifetime, and yet it was over in seconds. We reached the steps and ascended the wood solid beneath our feet. The spotlight followed us, a cone of brilliance that isolated us from the rest of the world, turning the audience into a sea of shadows. I stepped up to the microphone, but I did not speak immediately. I just stood there. I let the silence stretch out. I let the tension build until it was almost a physical thing in the room. I looked out into the darkness beyond the blinding lights. I knew exactly where they were. Darius, Tiffany, Nia, my mother. They were out there in the dark, huddled together, waiting to see the face of their savior. They were waiting to kiss the ring of the mysterious benefactor who was going to solve all their problems. I imagined their faces in the dark. Were they squinting? Were they leaning forward? Were they starting to realize that the shape of the man on stage was terrifyingly familiar? Were they starting to feel the first cold prickle of dread on the back of their necks? I took a deep breath. The air tasted cold and clean, filtered and expensive. It tasted like victory. I looked at Dante standing at my right hand. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. He was ready. I was ready. The charade was over. The janitor was gone. The failure was dead. The phoenix had risen, and it was time to introduce him to the people who tried to bury him. The spotlight widened just enough to catch the front row where my family stood frozen like statues in a museum of greed. I saw the exact moment the recognition hit Darius. It wasn't a gradual dawn of understanding, it was a violent collision. He was holding a crystal flute of vintage champagne halfway to his lips, a smug smile plastered on his face, ready to toast his new benefactor. Then our eyes locked. His smile didn't just fade, it vanished instantly, replaced by a look of absolute primal confusion that quickly curdled into horror. His brain couldn't process the image. The brother he had mocked, the brother he had sent to clean toilets, standing there in a tuxedo that cost more than his car. His hand went limp. He didn't even try to catch the glass. It fell in slow motion, tumbling through the air until it hit the marble floor with a shatter that sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. The expensive wine splattered across his rented tuxedo pants, staining them like fresh blood, but he didn't even flinch. He just stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a hook, unable to form a single word. Next to him, Tiffany looked like she had been struck by lightning. She was holding a delicate canapé, topped with caviar, trying to look elegant for the cameras she imagined were watching her. When she realized that the man on stage was the same man she had ordered to park her car in the dirt just hours ago, her entire world seemed to tilt on its axis. Her arrogance evaporated, leaving behind only naked terror. The appetizer slipped from her fingers, tumbling end over end to land on the pristine white tablecloth, leaving a dark smear of roe. She didn't look down. Her hands started to shake violently, the tremors traveling up her arms, until her silver bracelets rattled against each other. She looked sick. She looked like a woman realizing she had just burned down her own house while she was still inside it. But it was Nia who broke the silence. She had been standing behind them, trying to look invisible and important at the same time. She pushed forward, squinting through the glare, trying to make sense of the silhouette. When the light caught my face fully, the realization hit her like a physical blow. She staggered back, clutching the chest of her cheap red dress, as if her heart had stopped. "No!" She screamed, the word tearing out of her throat, raw and jagged. "No, it is not possible!" Heads turned. The elite of Atlanta looked at her with disdain, but she didn't care. She couldn't see them. She could only see me. She was looking at the Patek Philippe on my wrist. She was looking at the way Dante stood next to me, not as a subordinate, but as a partner. She was doing the math in her head, calculating the separation of assets agreement she had forced me to sign just days ago. She was realizing that the $50,000 debt she thought she had saddled me with was less than the cost of the watch I was wearing. "Impossible," she shrieked again, her voice climbing into hysteria. "You are broke. You are a janitor. This is a trick. Marcus, tell them it is a trick. I didn't say a word, I just looked at her. I looked at all of them. The shattered glass, the spilled food, the screaming ex-wife. It was a tableau of ruin. They were falling apart in front of everyone they wanted to impress, and I hadn't even spoken yet. I watched the hope drain out of their eyes, leaving only the cold, hard reality of their own failure. And in that silence, the sound of Darius's glass crunching under his shifting feet was the only applause I needed. I wrapped my fingers around the microphone, feeling the cold steel mesh against my palm. The feedback whine died down, leaving a silence so absolute you could hear a heartbreak. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the envy. I saw the admiration. But I did not look at the front row. I refused to give them the satisfaction of eye contact. They were ghosts to me now, just shadows in expensive clothes who had missed their chance to be part of the sun. They say success has many fathers, but failure is an orphan. I stood there letting those words hang in the air. A week ago I was that orphan. I was sleeping in a service van eating food that would make a stray dog turn up its nose. I was invisible. I was dirt. And the people who were supposed to lift me up were the ones standing on my neck. I paced the stage slowly, my tuxedo catching the light. I spoke to the room, but every word was a guided missile aimed at the 4 people shivering in the front row. You know what the funny thing about hitting rock bottom is? It clears your vision. When you have nothing, you see everything. You see who loves you for you, and who loves you for what you can give them. You see the cracks in the foundation that you painted over with loyalty. I paused, letting the weight of the statement settle. I tested the people closest to me. I asked for help. I did not ask for $1 million. I did not ask for a kidney. I asked for a place to sleep. I asked for a ride. I asked for basic human decency. And do you know what I got? I got a door slammed in my face. I got a divorce settlement thrown at me in a Waffle House. I got laughed at. I got erased. A murmur went through the crowd. They were eating it up. The drama, the mystery. They did not know the villains were sitting right there, but they could feel the heat of the fire. But in that wreckage I found something rare. I found a diamond in the dirt. I found someone who looked at a man with nothing and still saw a brother. Someone who shared his last dollar, not because he expected a return on investment, but because he had a heart that wasn't made of stone. I turned to Dante. He was standing a few feet away, looking sharp, looking ready, looking like he belonged. I gestured to him, my hand open and inviting. Loyalty isn't a word. It is an action. It is showing up when it is raining and the door's locked. It is a sandwich in a parking lot at 3 in the morning. That is what builds empires. Not greed, not ruthlessness. Loyalty. I looked back at the crowd, my voice rising, filling the cavernous room. Phoenix Rising isn't just a fund. It is a promise. A promise that we build up those who stand by us. And tonight, I am proud to introduce the man who stood by me when everyone else ran. The man who will help me build this city into something new. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to my partner, my cousin, and the new Vice President of Phoenix Rising, Mr. Dante King. The applause was thunderous. Dante stepped forward, a little shy at first, but then he smiled. It was a genuine smile, a winner's smile. I saw Darius shrink in his seat. I saw Nia cover her mouth. They weren't just watching a speech. They were watching their own eulogy, and I was just getting started. I raised a small silver remote control in my hand. It was the only weapon I needed. The room was still buzzing with the shock of my identity, but I was about to silence them with the weight of my reality. I pointed the remote at the massive LED wall behind me. The screen flickered from black to a blinding high-definition image. It was a screenshot, a simple banking dashboard, but the numbers were big enough to be read from the back row. $35,400,000. The post-tax lump sum of the winning lottery ticket sitting safely in the Phoenix Rising LLC account. I heard a collective intake of breath that sounded like the air being sucked out of an airlock. I looked down at Nia. She was staring at the screen, her eyes unblinking, her lips moving silently as she counted the commas. 1, 2, 7 digits, 8 digits. She was doing the math. She was realizing that the separation of assets agreement she had forced me to sign, the document her expensive lawyer had drafted to protect her from my imaginary debt, had just cost her $17.5 million. She looked like she had been shot in the stomach. I clicked the remote again. The image shifted. This time it was a legal document. A deed of acquisition finalized 48 hours ago. The asset listed was King Realty. The buyer was Phoenix Rising. Darius squinted at the screen. He leaned forward, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. He read the fine print, then he read it again. The blood drained from his face so fast it looked like he was turning into wax. "You wanted a big investor, Darius," I said, my voice booming over the speakers. "You wanted someone with deep pockets to take your firm to the next level. Well, congratulations, brother. You got your wish. Phoenix Rising didn't just invest. We bought the debt. We bought the mortgage on your office building. We bought the controlling interest. You do not own King Realty anymore. I do. You are standing there in a tuxedo you rented on a corporate card that is now billed to the man you made scrub your toilets." Darius started to shake. He looked at Tiffany. She was frozen, her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. But I wasn't done. I had one more slide. "And just so everyone here knows exactly what kind of business my brother runs," I said. I clicked the remote a third time. This wasn't a static image. It was a video file. The audio quality was crystal clear, recorded from the phone I had hidden in my pocket while I was on my knees cleaning his carpet. Darius's voice filled the ballroom, arrogant and loud, amplified by $50,000 worth of sound equipment. "We value it at $2 million as prime commercial real estate," the recording of Darius said. "Then I sell it to Phoenix Rising." Then Tiffany's voice, shrill and greedy. "Is not that risky? What if they check?" And Darius again, laughing that cruel laugh. "They will not check. By the time they realize the land is underwater, we will be cashing the check in the Caymans." The video looped. The words "underwater" and "Caymans" echoed through the silent ballroom like a judge's gavel. The room erupted. It wasn't applause this time. It was a low, angry rumble of shock and disgust. The investors, the bankers, the elite of Atlanta turned on Darius in an instant. They looked at him like he was a disease. Tiffany tried to hide behind Darius, but there was nowhere to go. The massive screen was projecting their crime in 40-foot-high letters. Darius looked like he was going to vomit. He looked at the screen, then at me, then at the exit signs. But he couldn't run. He was pinned down by the weight of his own voice confessing to fraud. I looked at them one last time before turning back to the crowd. "That is the truth about the King family legacy," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "It is built on lies. But Phoenix Rising is built on receipts. And I kept every single one." Nia watched the numbers on the screen and felt her entire reality fracture. $35 million. It was a number that didn't just buy things, it bought lives. It bought power. And she had just signed away her half of it for a leased Honda and a house with a leaking roof. She looked at Dr. Sterling standing beside her. He was looking at Marcus with open-mouthed awe and at her with dawning revulsion. He took a step away from her, physically distancing himself from the blast radius of her mistake. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through her chest. This could not be happening. It had to be a game, a test. Yes, that was it. Marcus was testing her loyalty. He wanted to see if she would break. And if she could just prove to him that she was still his wife, she could fix this. She could still save the G-Wagon. She could still be Mrs. Phoenix Rising. She moved before she even thought. She shoved Dr. Sterling aside, her fake nails digging into his silk suit. She scrambled toward the stage, her red dress riding up her heels, clicking frantically on the marble floor. "Marcus," she screamed, her voice shrill and desperate. Marcus, baby, wait. The crowd parted not out of respect, but out of the sheer awkwardness of witnessing a public breakdown. Nia reached the stairs to the stage. She stumbled on the first step, catching herself on the railing. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and wet with tears that were terrified, not sad. I knew it, she yelled, climbing higher. I knew you were testing me, Marcus. I knew you would not really leave me. It was all a game, right? To see if I was strong enough. I played along, baby. I played my part. Tell them I am your wife. She lunged toward the podium, her arms outstretched, ready to embrace the tuxedo she had mocked just hours ago. But she never reached me. Two security guards, massive men in black suits, who looked like they were carved out of granite, stepped out from the shadows. They moved with the speed of professionals. One of them caught Nia by the arm, stopping her momentum instantly. The other stepped in front of her, a living wall between her greed and my money. "Let me go!" she shrieked, thrashing against the guard's grip. "Get your hands off me! I am his wife!" "Marcus, tell them who I am." I looked at her. I didn't feel love. I didn't feel hate. I just felt the cold clarity of a contract fulfilled. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I didn't pull out a checkbook. I pulled out a folded document. The paper was crisp and white. I unfolded it slowly, deliberately, letting the microphone pick up the sound of the paper snapping open. I walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at her. She stopped, struggling, her eyes fixed on the paper in my hand. "You are not my wife, Nia," I said, my voice amplified and echoing through the hall. "You made sure of that. Do you recognize this?" I held up the document. The light hit the bold text at the top. "Stipulated judgment of dissolution of marriage. You signed this 2 days ago," I continued. "In a Waffle House. You sat across from me with your boyfriend and you demanded a clean break. You wanted a complete separation of assets. You wanted to make sure my debt didn't touch your credit score." Nia shook her head, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "No, Marcus, I didn't know. Marcus, I didn't know you had the money. I wouldn't have signed it if I knew. That is the point," I said, my voice dropping to a register that was almost a whisper, but still carried to the back of the room. "You wanted to throw away a failure. You didn't care about the man. You only cared about the balance sheet. Well, the balance sheet has changed, Nia. But the signature hasn't." I pointed to the paragraph at the bottom of the page. "Irrevocable," it says. "Any assets acquired by either party are their sole and separate property." You fought for this clause, Nia. Your expensive lawyer wrote it. You signed your own financial death warrant to save yourself from $50,000. And in doing so, you cost yourself $17 million. Nia stared at the paper. She slumped in the guard's grip, the fight draining out of her legs. She realized then that there was no spin she could put on this. There was no lie that could cover the legal reality she had created. She had gambled on my failure and she had lost everything. "Get her off my stage," I said to the guards. They began to drag her backward. She didn't scream anymore. She just sobbed, a low, broken sound of pure regret. She reached out one hand toward me, grasping at the air, grasping at the life she had thrown away with both hands. I watched her go. She wanted to be single. Now she was. And she was going to be the poorest single woman in Atlanta. The guards dragged Nia out the side door, her wails fading into the heavy silence of the ballroom. I did not watch her leave. My eyes were locked on the man in the front row who was trying to shrink into his chair until he disappeared. Darius looked like a man who had just realized the parachute he packed was full of silverware. He was sweating through his rental tuxedo, the moisture turning the cheap fabric dark under the armpits. I stepped back to the microphone. The feedback hummed low and dangerous. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice calm but carrying the weight of a judge's gavel. "We have handled the personal business. Now let us handle the professional." I clicked the remote one more time. The screen behind me changed. It was not a bank account this time. It was a corporate organizational chart. At the top was Phoenix Rising. Below it, attached by a solid black line, was King Realty, The ink on the acquisition papers was barely dry, but the hierarchy was clear. I owned the company that Darius worked for. Most of you know my brother Darius. You know him as the man who sells the dream. But tonight I want to introduce you to the man who sells the lie. You heard the recording. You heard him conspiring to defraud an investor. You heard him planning to sell worthless swampland at a 4,000% markup using fake appraisals. Darius stood up, his legs shaking so bad his knees knocked together. He looked around the room looking for an ally, looking for anyone who would help him. But the bankers and developers were looking at him like he was radioactive. Fraud is the one sin Wall Street does not forgive when it is caught on tape. Marcus, wait. Darius croaked, his voice cracking like a teenager's. We can explain. It was just talk. Sales talk. We were just brainstorming. I would never actually steal from you. We are brothers. It was not talk, Darius. I cut him off, my voice slicing through his excuses. It was conspiracy to commit wire fraud. And unfortunately for you, the investor you were planning to defraud happens to be your new boss. I looked at the crowd, making sure every eye was on him. Effective immediately, Darius King is relieved of his duties as senior broker at King Realty. He is fired for cause, gross misconduct, attempted embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty. Darius slumped back into his chair, a puppet with cut strings. But I wasn't done. I wanted to make sure he never got up again. And I am not just firing him, I continued. I am suing him. My legal team filed the paperwork an hour ago. We are conducting a forensic audit of every deal you have closed in the last 5 years, Darius. We are coming for everything. The house in Buckhead, the leased Mercedes, the offshore accounts you thought were hidden. You wanted to get rich quick. Instead, you are going to get poor slowly in a federal prison cell. Darius looked at Tiffany, but she was staring straight ahead, her face pale as a sheet, pretending she did not know him. He was alone, surrounded by the people he wanted to impress. He was stripped naked and branded a criminal. And I was the one holding the branding iron. Tiffany tried to inch away from Darius, creating a physical gap between herself and the husband who had just become a radioactive liability. She smoothed the front of her $5,000 gown and lifted her chin, trying to summon the air of a woman who was merely a bystander to a crime rather than an accomplice. She looked toward the exit, calculating the distance to the door, hoping she could slip away into the night and pretend none of this had happened. I stepped down from the podium. The sound of my patent leather shoes on the stage stairs echoed like gunshots in the silent ballroom. I walked straight toward her, ignoring Darius, who was now weeping silently into his hands. I stopped 2 feet in front of Tiffany. She refused to meet my eyes, staring fixedly at the diamond stud in my shirt cuff as if it were the sun. Going somewhere, Tiffany? I asked, my voice deceptively light. The party is just getting started, and we have some business to discuss. She finally looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but not with remorse. They were wet with fear. She opened her mouth to speak, probably to claim she was a victim of Darius's schemes, but I cut her off with a raised hand. Do not, I said sharply. Do not insult my intelligence. I heard you on the speakerphone, Tiffany. I heard you planning to rob me. But that is not why I am talking to you right now. I am talking to you because of what happened on your front porch on Thanksgiving. I took a step closer, invading her personal space just like she had done to the valet in the driveway. You made me take off my boots, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You told me I smelled like a crawl space. You said I was too dirty to walk on your precious Persian rug. You treated me like an infection, Tiffany, like something you had to scrape off your shoe. I never... She stammered, her face going pale beneath the heavy makeup. I was just stressed, Marcus. You know how I get about the house. It has to be perfect. It is not your house, I said. She blinked. What? I said it is not your house. Not anymore. I pulled a document from my inside pocket. It was not a deed. It was a notice of default and immediate seizure. You see, Tiffany, when Darius needed cash to fund his lifestyle, he took out a massive second mortgage against the Buckhead mansion. He leveraged everything to keep up appearances, and the bank that held that toxic debt was more than happy to sell the note to Phoenix Rising this morning for pennies on the dollar. I held the paper up so she could read the header. Notice of foreclosure. I am your landlord now, Tiffany. I am the bank, and I am calling in the loan. She shook her head, the denial frantic in her eyes. You cannot do that. We have rights. We have 30 days. Eviction takes months. Read the fine print, I said, pointing to the bottom line. Default due to criminal activity allows for immediate seizure of assets to cover restitution. Since your husband just confessed to conspiracy to commit wire fraud on tape, the clause is active. You do not have 30 days. You do not even have 30 hours. I leaned in close so only she could hear the final nail in the coffin. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises. And Tiffany, I want that house empty. Leave the furniture. Leave the art. Leave the Persian rug. Those are company assets now. You can take your clothes and your jewelry, assuming you have receipts to prove they were not bought with stolen money. She looked like she was going to faint. She looked around at the crowd, realizing that everyone she wanted to impress was watching her being evicted in real time. The shame was burning her alive. But where will I go? She whispered, her voice trembling. I have nowhere to go. I looked her up and down, taking in the silver dress and the diamonds. You look like a resourceful woman, I said, cold as ice. Maybe you can sleep in the limo. Just make sure you take your shoes off first. I would not want you getting the upholstery dirty. My mother, Viola, pushed through the crowd, her face a mask of crumbling plaster and running mascara. She looked small suddenly. The imperious matriarch who had slammed the door in my face because I looked like a vagrant was gone. In her place was a terrified old woman, realizing her golden parachute had just been set on fire. She reached out for my hand, her fingers trembling like dry leaves in the wind. Marcus, baby. Please, she sobbed, her voice cracking. You have to understand. I was misled. Darius told me it was a sure thing. He told me he was doing it for the family. I am an old woman, Marcus. I do not know about business. I just wanted us to be secure. I stepped back, avoiding her touch. I looked at her with the same detachment I would feel looking at a stranger. You are not old, Mom, I said, my voice flat. You are greedy. There is a difference. You knew exactly what you were doing when you signed that deed. I stood in your living room and begged you not to sell Dad's legacy. I told you it was a mistake. And do you remember what you called me? You called me an anchor. You said I was dragging you down to the gutter. Viola winced as if I had struck her. I was angry, she wailed. I did not mean it. A mother loves all her children. I love you, Marcus. I have always loved you. I laughed, a harsh, dry sound. You love winners, Mom. You love status. You love the idea of a son who can buy you things. You did not love me when I was sleeping in a van. You did not love me when I asked for a place to stay, and you worried about what the church ladies would think. You loved the image of Darius. And now that image is broken. I pointed at Darius, who was still slumped in his chair, weeping into his hands. You bet on the wrong horse, Mom, I said brutally. You put all your chips on Darius. You sold the land Dad worked 20 years to pay off just so Darius could play big shot for a week. Well, the game is over, and you lost. But where will I go? She cried, clutching her purse to her chest. I sold the land. The money is gone. Darius spent it on fees and bribes. I have nothing, Marcus. I am your mother. You cannot leave me on the street. I leaned in close so she could see the absolute resolve in my eyes. I am not leaving you on the street, Mom. You have Darius. He is the golden child, remember? He is the one with the vision. I am sure he will take excellent care of you. Maybe you can sleep on his couch. Oh, wait. I just repossessed his house. Maybe you can both find a nice bridge to sleep under. Marcus, please, she begged, reaching for my sleeve. Do not be cruel. This is not you. This is exactly me, I said, pulling my arm away. This is the man you made. You taught me that worth is tied to net worth. You taught me that family is a transaction. Well, Mom, the transaction is declined. Insufficient funds. I turned my back on her. I heard her sobbing, calling my name, but I did not look back. She had made her choice the night she chose a party over her son. Now she had to live in the world she had helped create. A world where she was just another liability. I had cut loose. Doctor. Sterling watched the spectacle unfold with the detached precision of a surgeon observing a procedure gone wrong. He saw Nia being dragged off the stage sobbing and broken. He saw Marcus revealing the true extent of his wealth. And most importantly, he saw the document that legally severed Nia from every single dime of that fortune. The separation of assets agreement, the one he had encouraged her to get. His mind calculated the risk versus reward in nanoseconds. Nia was no longer an asset, she was a liability. She had no house, no car, no savings. And now she had a vengeful ex-husband who was richer than God. Staying with her was financial suicide. He turned on his heel, not even bothering to look for her in the crowd. He walked straight toward the exit, moving fast. He needed to cancel the venue in Paris. He needed to get the refund on the ring. He needed to scrub his Instagram of any photos of them together. But Nia saw him. She had managed to break free from the security guards for a moment, her hair wild, her face streaked with mascara. She saw the back of his silk suit retreating toward the door, and panic seized her. "Sterling," she screamed, her voice raw. "Sterling, wait for me." "Where are you going?" He didn't stop. He didn't even slow down. He just kept walking, his eyes fixed on the exit sign. "Sterling," she wailed, running after him, stumbling in her high heels. "Do not leave me. We are getting married. You promised." He stopped then, just for a second. He turned his head, looking at her over his shoulder with a sneer of pure contempt. "Married," he scoffed. "To a woman with nothing." "I do not think so, Nia. The deal is off. You brought nothing to the table but drama and debt. Find some other sucker to pay your bills." He walked out into the night, leaving her standing alone in the middle of the ballroom. The guests stared at her. The whispers started. She looked around, realizing she was completely, truly alone. The man she betrayed her husband for had just abandoned her the moment her value dropped to zero. She sank to her knees right there on the marble floor and let out a wail of despair that echoed off the crystal chandeliers. It was the sound of a woman who had gambled everything and lost. And the house always wins. Dante stepped up to the microphone. The room was still reeling from the spectacle of Nia's breakdown and Sterling's exit, but Dante's presence demanded attention. He adjusted his tie, a simple movement that carried the weight of his transformation. He wasn't just wearing a suit. He was wearing authority. He looked down at the front row where Darius was still slumped in defeat. Tiffany was frozen in shock and Viola was weeping into her hands. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. A deep, profound disappointment that only family can inflict. "You know," he began, his voice steady and clear, amplified through the ballroom. "For years I thought something was wrong with me. I thought because I didn't have the right job, or the right car, or the right address that I was broken. I listened to you, Aunt Viola, talk about legacy and status. I watched you, Darius, treat people like stepping stones. And I believed you. I believed that I was less than." He paused, letting his gaze drift over the faces of the people who had dismissed him for his entire life. "But Marcus taught me something different. He taught me that value isn't what you wear or what you drive. It is who you are when nobody is watching. When Marcus was sleeping in a van, he still had more integrity than all of you combined. When I was driving strangers around for minimum wage, I was still building something real." He pointed a finger at Darius, who flinched as if expecting another blow. "You called us trash, Darius. You slapped me in a parking lot because you thought I stole an earring. You didn't see a cousin. You saw a suspect. You saw a problem. Well, look at us now. We are not the problem anymore. We are the solution. We are the ones signing the checks. We are the ones building the future." He looked at Viola, his expression softening just a fraction, but his resolve remaining hard as iron. "You missed it, Auntie. You spent so much time looking for gold in the dirt that you didn't realize you were standing on a diamond mine. You threw away your son. You ignored your nephew. And for what? for an image, for a lie. He stepped back from the mic, standing shoulder to shoulder with me. We are done being your punching bags. We are done being your punchlines. From now on, if you want to see us, you look up, because we are never coming down to your level again. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of truth. Dante had spoken for every black sheep, for every outcast, for everyone who had ever been told they weren't enough. And in that moment, he stood taller than anyone in the room. I stepped off the stage, feeling lighter than I had in years. The weight of the secret, the burden of the deception, it was all gone, left behind on that podium along with the shattered remains of my family's pride. I didn't look back at them. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what I would see. Darius broken, Tiffany humiliated, Nia abandoned, Viola realizing she had bet on the wrong horse. I walked toward the exit, Dante by my side. The crowd parted for us again, but this time the silence was respectful, awestruck. We weren't just two men in suits, we were legends. We were the phoenix rising. Outside, the night air was cool and crisp. It smelled of rain and exhaust and expensive perfume. A Rolls-Royce Phantom midnight blue to match my tuxedo was waiting at the curb. The driver, a man named Paul, who used to work security for the Hawks, opened the back door. "Where to, Mr. King?" Paul asked, his voice deep and rumbling. "Anywhere but here, Paul," I said, sliding into the plush leather seat. "Just drive." Dante got in beside me. He leaned back against the headrest and let out a long, slow breath. He looked out the window at the glittering facade of the St. Regis. "Did we really just do that?" he asked, his voice quiet. "We did," I said, "and it is done." He looked at me, a slow grin spreading across his face. "So what now, Marcus? What do we do now?" I looked at him. I looked at the city skyline, reflecting in the window. I thought about the $55 million sitting in the bank. I thought about the future stretching out before us like an open road. Now, I said, we build. We build something real, something that lasts, and we do it our way. No lies, no shortcuts, just us. I looked back at the hotel entrance one last time. I saw figures emerging from the doors. My family. They looked small from here, distant, like characters in a movie I had already finished watching. They were shouting at each other, pointing fingers, trying to assign blame for the disaster they had created. Let them fight, I thought. Let them tear each other apart. I am done. Paul closed the heavy door, sealing us inside the quiet luxury of the car. The sound of the city faded away, replaced by the soft hum of the engine. I didn't look back as we pulled away. I didn't feel a pang of regret. I didn't feel a flicker of sadness. I just felt peace. The kind of peace that comes when you finally stop carrying a weight that wasn't yours to bear. "Forward, Paul," I said. The car glided into the traffic, merging seamlessly with the stream of lights flowing through the city. We were moving, we were rising, and we were never looking back. The screen went black. But for me, the movie was just beginning. This story reveals a brutal but necessary truth. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom to see who is really standing there with you. Marcus's wealth didn't change him. It simply unveiled the true nature of everyone around him. We learned that shared blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, and sometimes the person with the least to give offers the most integrity. The greatest victory wasn't the millions, but the freedom found in cutting toxic ties. True value isn't what you wear or drive, but who you are when the world isn't watching. Surround yourself with those who value your heart, not your wallet. If you believe that loyalty is worth more than gold, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about justice and rising above.